The sun hung mercilessly in the cloudless New Mexico sky, casting harsh shadows across the rugged landscape. Jackson Wade crouched behind a boulder, his weathered hand steady as he peered through the scope of his Winchester rifle. A six-point buck grazed in the clearing ahead, unaware of the hunter's presence. Wade's finger rested lightly on the trigger, his breathing slow and measured. At 57, his body bore the marks of a life lived hard in the unforgiving West. Deep lines etched his sun-browned face, and a scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, a souvenir from Shiloh. His once dark hair had faded to steel gray, pulled back in a short ponytail that brushed the collar of his faded blue shirt. The buck raised its head, suddenly ears twitching. Wade remained perfectly still, a skill perfected over decades in these mountains. Just as he prepared to take the shot, a distant sound caught his attention. Voices carried on the wind from the valley below. The deer bolted into the underbrush. Wade lowered his rifle with a sigh and reached for his battered field glasses. Adjusting the focus, he scanned the terrain until he spotted what had disturbed his hunt, a gathering of people near the dry creek bed. It was unusual to see such a crowd this far from town. Wade counted at least 30 figures clustered in a rough circle. In the center stood a tall man in a black coat addressing the assembly. The man's gestures were commanding, authoritative. Wade's curiosity overcame his disappointment at losing the buck. He secured his rifle and made his way down the rocky slope, moving with the quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to traversing difficult terrain. As he drew closer, the voices grew clearer and the scene unfolded with disturbing clarity. The crowd had formed on what appeared to be an impromptu court. The tall man in the black coat was Judge Harlan Reed, his silver beard catching the sunlight as he spoke. Wade knew Reed by reputation, the most powerful man in Copper Springs, whose word was considered law throughout the county. "The evidence against the accused is irrefutable," Reed was saying, his deep voice carrying across the hushed gathering. "She was caught red-handed with documents stolen from my office documents detailing business arrangements that are not the concern of her kind." Wade stopped at the edge of the crowd, his presence barely acknowledged, as all eyes remained fixed on the center of the circle. There on her knees in the dust knelt a young Apache woman. Her long black hair hung in tangles around her face, partially obscuring features that might once have been striking, but were now marred by bruises. Her hands were bound behind her back with coarse rope that had worn her wrists raw. "Swift River has violated not only my trust, but the trust of this entire community," Reed continued, pacing before the kneeling woman. "She has proven what many of us have long suspected, that savages cannot be civilized, cannot be trusted among decent folk." The young woman raised her head, her dark eyes flashing with defiance despite her vulnerable position. "I took nothing but what showed your crimes," she said, her voice clear despite the split in her lower lip. "You sell my people. You..." The back of Reed's hand connected with her cheek, silencing her with a sharp crack that made Wade's jaw tighten. No one in the crowd moved to intervene. "The law of our fathers provides for such cases," Reed announced, straightening his coat. "When guilt is evident but must be confirmed beyond all doubt, we turn to a higher justice." He gestured toward the sun overhead. 3 days under heaven's gaze will determine her fate. If she survives, she walks free. If not, her guilt is proven by divine judgment. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Wade had heard of this sun law, but had never witnessed it. It was an old practice brought west by settlers who claimed it dated back to colonial times. In truth, it was a death sentence disguised as justice. Few could survive 3 days of exposure in the desert heat without water. 4 men stepped forward with iron stakes and hammers. The Apache woman was dragged to a flat stretch of ground where the sun bore down without mercy. The men drove the stakes deep into the hard earth and bound her limbs, stretching her spread eagle on the ground. "This woman calls herself Swift River," Reed declared to the assembled witnesses. "Let nature judge what we already know." As the crowd began to disperse, Wade remained a still figure, observing from the shadow of a juniper tree. Reed noticed him and approached, recognition dawning in his cold gray eyes. "Mr. Wade," he said with a nod that contained neither warmth nor genuine respect. "Rare to see you down from your mountain." "Come to witness justice," Wade studied the judge's face, noting the satisfaction that lurked behind his solemn expression. "Is that what you call this?" Reed's smile tightened. "The law takes different forms in different places, Mr. Wade. Out here, away from Eastern courtrooms and their endless debates, we must be more direct." Looks like torture to me, Wade said quietly. Your time as an army surgeon has made you soft. Reed replied, his tone hardening. This territory requires strength to survive. The Apache understand this better than most. He gestured toward the bound woman. She knew the risks when she stole from me. Wade's gaze shifted to Swift River, who lay motionless against the ground, her eyes closed against the relentless sun. And if someone were to interfere with this, justice, Reed's hand moved to rest on the pistol at his hip, a casual gesture that carried clear threat. They would find themselves facing similar judgment. We respect the old ways here, Mr. Wade. I suggest you do the same. With that, Reed turned and walked away, followed by several men who cast suspicious glances back at Wade. Among them, Wade noticed the Blackburn brothers, Luke and Ezra, known throughout the territory as ruthless bounty hunters, who asked few questions about the jobs they took. By late afternoon, the area had emptied of all but a few figures. Reed had stationed the Blackburns at a distance, ostensibly to ensure that the sentence was carried out without interference. They had set up a small camp on a rise overlooking the site, occasionally passing a bottle between them as they watched. Wade retreated to the hills but didn't return to his cabin. Instead, he made a cold camp in a sheltered ravine where he could observe the scene below without being spotted. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in fiery hues of orange and red, he waited. The temperature dropped rapidly as darkness fell. Wade moved silently down the slope, staying in the shadows and avoiding the Blackburn's position. The brothers had built a small fire and appeared to be engrossed in a card game, their attention divided between their cards and an occasional glance toward their prisoner. When Wade reached Swift River, her condition had deteriorated. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, her breathing shallow. The day's heat had left her skin raw, and the night's chill now threatened to sap what strength remained. He knelt beside her, checking for signs of heat stroke. Her pulse was rapid but weak, her skin hot to the touch despite the cooling air. She stirred at his presence, her eyes fluttering open to reveal dilated pupils. Water, she whispered the word barely audible. Wade uncorked his canteen and lifted her head gently, allowing her a few small sips. Too much too quickly could be as dangerous as none at all. After she had drunk, he dampened a cloth and wiped her face, cleaning away the dust and dried blood. Please, she managed, her voice a rasp. Untie me. Wade glanced toward the Blackburns' camp. They were still absorbed in their game, but a shout or sudden movement would draw their attention immediately. You're in bad shape, he said softly, his trained eye assessing her condition with clinical precision. Another day like this will kill you. I know, she replied, a spark of determination showing through her exhaustion. But I'm innocent. Wade studied her face, searching for deception, but finding only resolve beneath the pain. Something in her gaze, a fierce dignity, despite her circumstances, reminded him painfully of another woman he had once known. Memories flooded back unbidden. Willow Song, his wife, with her gentle hands and steel backbone. Lily, their daughter, who had inherited her mother's strength and his stubbornness. Both gone 15 years, now killed when raiders attacked their village while he was away. He had returned to find only ashes and 2 fresh graves dug by surviving tribal members. The guilt had never left him, that he hadn't been there, that he couldn't save them. He had retreated to the mountains afterward, a broken man, turning his back on the world that had taken everything from him. Now, looking into Swift River's eyes, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the stirring of purpose. I'm going to cut you loose, he whispered, drawing a knife from his boot. But we'll need to move fast and quiet. The Blackburns have good ears. He worked quickly, slicing through the ropes at her wrists and ankles. The bindings had cut deep, leaving angry red welts on her skin. She tried to sit up, but fell back with a muffled gasp of pain. Easy, Wade cautioned, supporting her shoulders. Your muscles have been stretched for hours. Take it slow. As he helped her to a sitting position, something caught his eye, a silver chain around her neck, partially hidden beneath her torn dress. A small jade pendant in the shape of a leaf hung from it, its green surface gleaming dully in the moonlight. Wade's breath caught in his throat. He knew that necklace had commissioned it himself from a silversmith in Santa Fe as a gift for Lily's 10th birthday, her last. It had been crafted to match the shape of a cottonwood leaf, Lily's favorite tree. Where did you get this? He asked, his voice barely controlled as he touched the pendant. Swift River's hand went protectively to the necklace. It was my mother's, she said. The only thing I have of her. Family treasure. Before Wade could question her further, a shout came from the direction of the Blackburns' camp. Luke Blackburn was standing pointing in their direction. "We've got to move," Wade urged, helping Swift River to her feet. She swayed dangerously and he caught her before she could fall. "Can you walk?" "I will walk," she replied with grim determination, though her legs trembled visibly. Wade half-carried her to where he had left his horse tethered among the junipers. Behind them, the bounty hunters were scrambling to saddle their own mounts, their curses carrying clearly through the still night air. He lifted Swift River onto his horse and swung up behind her, feeling her body sag against his chest as her remaining strength began to fade. "Hold on," he murmured, spurring the horse forward into the darkness. They rode hard through the night, taking game trails and dry creek beds that would be difficult to follow. Wade knew these mountains better than most, having spent years exploring their hidden valleys and box canyons. Still, the Blackburns were experienced trackers, and with daylight, the pursuit would intensify. Swift River drifted in and out of consciousness as they rode. When she was lucid, Wade gave her small amounts of water and jerky from his saddlebags. By dawn, they had put considerable distance between themselves and their pursuers, but her condition was worsening. "We need to find shelter," Wade decided, noting how she shivered despite the warming air. "Somewhere to rest and treat your injuries properly." "They'll kill you for helping me," Swift River murmured, her head lolling against his shoulder. "They can try," Wade replied grimly. As the sun rose fully above the eastern ridges, Wade guided his horse toward a remote canyon where an old friend had built a cabin years ago. Nathan Cooper had been a lawman most of his life, serving as sheriff in various frontier towns before retiring to this hidden spot. Like Wade, he preferred solitude, but unlike Wade, he had maintained connections throughout the territory. The cabin came into view around midday, a sturdy log structure built against a cliff face with a small corral and smokehouse nearby. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, indicating Cooper was in residence. Wade approached cautiously, ever mindful that news traveled fast in the territory. But Cooper emerged from the cabin with a welcoming wave, his weathered face breaking into a smile that faded quickly when he saw Swift River's condition. "Trouble follows you like a shadow, Jackson," Cooper remarked, helping Wade lift the semi-conscious woman from the horse. Despite being in his 60s, Cooper's arms were corded with muscle from years of hard work. "Bring her inside." They carried Swift River into the cabin and laid her gently on Cooper's bed. The interior was sparse but clean, with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with chairs and shelves lined with books, an unusual luxury in the territory. "Reed's work?" Cooper asked as he brought a basin of water and clean cloths. Wade nodded, removing his hat and placing it on the table. "The son-in-law. She was accused of stealing documents from his office." Cooper's expression darkened. "That damn practice. I thought civilized society had left it behind." He soaked a cloth and began cleaning Swift River's wounds with practiced efficiency. "She's not the first you know. There have been others, all Apache or mixed blood, and all found guilty under Reed's judgment." Wade looked up sharply. "How many? 7 that I know of in the past 5 years. None survived the full 3 days." Cooper wrung out the cloth, the water in the basin turning pink. "Reed calls it justice. I call it murder with ceremony." While Cooper tended to Swift River, Wade built up the fire and put coffee on to boil. His mind was working through the implications of what he had done and what might come next. Reed would not let this go. His authority had been challenged publicly. The Blackburns would track them here eventually. "You're thinking too loud, Jackson," Cooper said, joining him by the fire after finishing his ministrations. "She's sleeping now. The burns are bad, but she's strong. She'll live if infection doesn't set in." Wade poured them both coffee in tin cups, the strong brew bitter and bracing. "Reed will send men." "Let him." Cooper sipped his coffee, seemingly untroubled. "This cabin has survived Apache raids and army patrols. A few bounty hunters don't worry me." "The Blackburns aren't ordinary bounty hunters." "No, they're not," Cooper agreed. "But I've known them longer than Reed has. They respect certain boundaries." He set his cup down and fixed Wade with a penetrating stare. "What I want to know is why you've stepped into this fight after all these years of hiding in the hills." Wade's gaze drifted to the small jade pendant visible at Swift River's throat as she slept. "Something about her," he began, then shook his head. "I couldn't just watch her die." Cooper followed his gaze, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "There's more to this story than you're telling me." Before Wade could respond, a low moan came from the bed. Swift River was stirring, her face contorted in pain. Wade moved quickly to her side, checking her forehead for fever. Her skin was hot, but not dangerously so. "You're safe," he told her, as her eyes opened, confusion evident in their depths. "This is Nathan Cooper's place. He's a friend." Swift River's gaze darted around the unfamiliar surroundings before settling on Wade's face. Recognition slowly dawned. "You cut me free," she whispered. "Yes." Why, it was a simple question with no simple answer. Wade reached for the water cup on the bedside table, helping her drink before responding. "Because it was the right thing to do." She studied him with eyes that seemed to see more than he wanted to reveal. "Men like you don't usually help people like me. What kind of man do you think I am?" "A white man who lives alone," she said bluntly. "Such men usually hate Indians or fear them. Sometimes both." Despite himself, Wade felt a smile tug at his lips, the first in longer than he could remember. "My wife was Apache," he said quietly. "My daughter was half." Swift River's expression changed surprise, replacing suspicion. "Was Chloe, they died 15 years ago." Understanding passed between them, the unspoken recognition of loss that transcended words. Swift River nodded slightly, a gesture that acknowledged his pain without pity. "I am sorry for your grief," she said simply. Cooper had been observing their exchange from across the room. Now he approached carrying a small pot of salve. "This will help with the burns," he told Swift River, offering the container to Wade. "It's a mixture of aloe and herbs I learned about from a Navajo healer." As Wade applied the cooling salve to Swift River's raw skin, Cooper posed a question directly to her. "What did you see in Reed's office that got you condemned?" Swift River hesitated, her eyes meeting Wade's before she answered. "Ledgers. Records of people bought and sold like cattle. Apache women, mostly some children." Her voice hardened. "My people disappear and no one asks where they go, but I asked. I found answers in his papers." Cooper and Wade exchanged grim looks. The trade in human lives was nothing new in the territories, but to have evidence against someone as powerful as Reed was significant and dangerous. "Did you take these documents?" Cooper asked. Swift River shook her head. "No time, he caught me. Said I was stealing valuables." A bitter smile twisted her lips. The only valuable thing in his office was the truth. As she spoke, Wade noticed something in her speech patterns, an echo of formal education beneath the frontier dialect. It suggested she hadn't been raised entirely in the traditional Apache way. "Where did you grow up?" he asked. "With the Bennetts in Santa Fe," she replied. "White family that took me in after my village was attacked. I was very young." Her hand went unconsciously to the jade pendant. "I remember little of that time. Just fire screams and a man in a mask." Wade felt a chill run through him. The timing aligned too perfectly with the attack on his family's village. But there had been no survivors from that massacre, at least none he had been told about. "How old were you?" he asked, working to keep his voice steady. 9, maybe 10 summers. The Bennetts raised me, sent me to mission school." Her eyes took on a faraway look. "They were kind, but I knew I was different. When I was old enough, I began searching for my roots." "And that led you to Reed?" Swift River nodded. "I took work as his clerk 6 months ago. People talk freely around Indians they think are tame." Her expression hardened. "I heard things about women gone missing, about Reed's special arrangement with a man in Santa Fe who ships merchandise south to the mines." Cooper stood and moved to a locked chest in the corner of the room. He returned with a sheaf of papers which he spread on the table. "I've been tracking Reed's activities for years," he said, indicating notes and maps covered in his neat handwriting. "Started when I was still sheriff in Tucson, could never get enough evidence to bring charges." Wade examined the documents, impressed by the thoroughness of Cooper's investigation. "Reed has powerful friends," he observed. "More than powerful. Territorial governor included," Cooper replied. "That's why no official complaints against him stick." But this, he tapped Swift River's account. "This could be the thread that unravels the whole tapestry." Swift River attempted to sit up, grimacing with the effort. Wade supported her, propping pillows behind her back. "I need to finish what I started," she said, determination evident in every line of her body. "You need to heal first," Wade countered gently but firmly. "Reed thinks you will be dead by tomorrow. That gives us time to plan. The Blackburns will track us here," she argued. "Let them come," Cooper said, patting the rifle leaning against the wall. "We've got supplies for a siege if needed." They passed the rest of the day in preparation. Cooper reinforced the cabin's defenses, while Wade cleaned and checked their weapons. Swift River slept fitfully, her body beginning the slow process of recovery. When darkness fell, they kept the lamps low and maintained a watch rotation. Wade took the first shift sitting by the window with his Winchester across his lap. The night was quiet except for the distant howl of coyotes and the soft whisper of wind through the pines. His thoughts turned to the jade pendant and its impossible presence around Swift River's neck. Could she really be Lily? His daughter's body had been identified by tribal elders who knew her well. They had no reason to lie, and yet, the necklace, the age, the timing of the attack, too many coincidences for a man who had long since stopped believing in them. Around midnight, Swift River woke with a small gasp. Wade moved quickly to her side, concerned that fever might have taken hold. "Just dreams," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the faint moonlight coming through the window. "Bad ones." "About the sun," Wade asked, offering her water. She shook her head. "About before, the fire, the masks." She drank deeply, then handed back the cup. "I dream of a woman singing to me as we hide. Her voice is soft, but her hands are strong." Wade's heart constricted painfully in his chest. Willow Song had often sung traditional lullabies to Lily, especially when the child was frightened. "Do you remember the song?" he asked, his mouth suddenly dry. Swift River closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. Then softly she began to hum a melody that Wade had not heard in 15 years, a simple Apache cradle song that Willow Song had sung to their daughter every night before sleep. He sat perfectly still, afraid that any movement would shatter this moment, suspended between past and present. The tune was unmistakable, every rise and fall exactly as he remembered. When she finished, Swift River opened her eyes to find Wade staring at her, his weathered face transformed by emotion he couldn't hide. "You know this song," she said, not a question, but a realization. "My wife sang it," he replied, his voice rough, "to our daughter." A heavy silence fell between them, filled with possibilities neither was ready to name. Cooper's voice broke the moment as he emerged from his small back room. "My turn to watch," he said, noting the tension in the air, but choosing not to comment on it. "You should get some sleep, Jackson." Wade nodded, grateful for the interruption. He needed time to process what had just happened, to examine his suspicions objectively rather than through the lens of desperate hope. He moved to the small cot Cooper had set up for him and lay down, but sleep remained elusive. His mind kept returning to the melody Swift River had hummed and the impossibility of her knowing it, unless a sharp crack shattered the pre-dawn stillness. A rifle shot followed immediately by the sound of breaking glass. Cooper dropped to the floor as a bullet splintered the window frame inches from his head. "Blackburns!" he shouted, crawling toward his rifle. Wade was already moving, grabbing his Winchester and positioning himself at the second window. "Swift River, stay down," he called as more shots rang out. Outside voices called to each other as the attackers repositioned. Wade counted at least 4 distinct voices, more than just the Blackburn brothers. Reed had sent additional men. "They're trying to surround us," Cooper assessed, peering cautiously through the broken window. 2 at the front, 2 working around to the back. Wade took careful aim at a shadow moving between the trees and fired. A cry of pain confirmed his hit, though he couldn't tell how severe. "Cooper," a voice shouted from the darkness. "We just want the Indian woman, send her out and we'll leave you be." "That's Luke Blackburn," Cooper muttered. "Go to hell, Luke," he shouted back. "You're trespassing on my property." "Don't be a fool, old man. Reed's offering $500 for her dead or alive." "Since when do you take orders from Reed?" Cooper called, trying to buy time as he reloaded. "I remember when the Blackburn answered to no man." A pause followed, suggesting Cooper's words had struck home. The Blackburn brothers had a reputation for fierce independence that bordered on lawlessness. "Times change," came the eventual reply, "and 500 is 500. The exchange gave Wade time to formulate a plan. The cabin had been built with defense in mind, with a concealed exit through the root cellar that led to a narrow ravine behind the property. "We can't hold them off indefinitely," he told Cooper quietly. "And if they're willing to kill us to get to her, Reed must be desperate." Cooper nodded grimly. "The tunnel's our best option. I'll cover your escape." Wade glanced at Swift River, who had positioned herself behind the solid stone chimney, a determination in her eyes that belied her weakened state. "Can you travel?" he asked her. Yes, she replied without hesitation. Cooper moved to the stone hearth and pulled aside a bearskin rug, revealing a trap door. This leads to a mine shaft that comes out half a mile downstream, he explained as he lifted the heavy door. Follow it east, and you'll reach Holloway Station by nightfall. Come with us, Wade urged his friend, not liking the look of resignation he saw in Cooper's eyes. Cooper shook his head. Someone needs to make them think you're still here, buy you time to get clear. He handed Wade a packet of papers from his investigation. Take these. Sarah Holloway knows people in Santa Fe who can help, including a federal judge who's no friend of Reed's. Another volley of shots peppered the cabin walls. Wade knew they had no time to argue. He helped Swift River to the trap door, grabbing his saddlebags and rifle. I'll give them something to remember me by, Cooper promised with a grim smile. Now go. Wade clasped his old friend's shoulder, a lifetime of shared experiences passing between them in that brief contact. Then he descended into the darkness after Swift River pulling the trapdoor shut behind them. Cooper's voice filtered through faintly as he barred the door from above. Good luck, old friend. Find the truth. The tunnel was narrow and damp, its walls supported by aged timber that creaked ominously in places. Wade lit a small lantern from his pack, revealing a passage that sloped gently downward. Swift River moved ahead of him, her steps unsteady but determined. They had gone perhaps 100 yards when the muffled sound of gunfire erupted behind them, followed by a man's shout of pain. Wade paused, listening intently, but Swift River urged him onward. He chose his fight, she said softly. Honor his choice by surviving. Wade knew she was right, though it didn't ease the weight of leaving Cooper behind. They pressed on through the tunnel, which eventually opened into a broader mine shaft with rusted tracks still visible on the floor. Old silver mine, Wade explained as they followed the tracks eastward. Played out 20 years ago, but the Apaches knew about it long before the white miners came. Swift River nodded. My people have stories of the shining stones that draw greedy men. They say such wealth brings only sorrow. And they emerged from the mine as dawn was breaking, finding themselves in a sheltered ravine thick with pine and juniper. Wade secured the hidden entrance behind them, disguising it with brush and stones. We'll rest here until dark, he decided, noting Swift River's exhaustion, despite her stoic expression. Too dangerous to move in daylight. They made a cold camp in a small cave formed by fallen boulders. Wade treated Swift River's wounds again with Cooper's salve, noting with relief that no infection had set in. Her resilience impressed him. Most people would have been incapacitated by what she had endured. As they shared jerky and the last of Wade's coffee, Swift River studied him with unwavering intensity. You recognize my necklace, she said finally. Why, Wade hesitated, weighing the implications of his suspicions against the pain of possible disappointment. It's very similar to one I gave my daughter, he answered carefully, on her last birthday. Swift River touched the jade leaf pendant thoughtfully. And your wife sang that lullaby, I know. Yes. What were their names, your wife and daughter? Willow Song was my wife, Wade replied, the names feeling strange on his tongue after so many years of silence. Our daughter was Lily. Swift River closed her eyes briefly as if searching inward for something just beyond reach. Lily, she repeated softly. It feels familiar. Wade wanted desperately to believe, to grasp at this thread of hope after 15 years of grief. But caution tempered his response. Many Apache children were orphaned in those years, he said. Many were taken in by white families. The necklace could have been traded or sold. And the song Swift River challenged. How would I know a lullaby your wife sang? I don't know, Wade admitted, but jumping to conclusions without proof would be unfair to both of us. She accepted this with a nod, respecting his restraint, even as questions hung between them unasked and unanswered. They rested through the day, taking turns keeping watch. No pursuit materialized, suggesting that Cooper had indeed bought them valuable time. Wade tried not to think about what that might have cost his friend. As dusk approached, they prepared to move on. Swift River's strength had returned somewhat, though the ordeal had left its mark. Wade fashioned a walking stick from a juniper branch to help support her. Holloway Station is about 10 miles east, he told her as they set out in the gathering darkness. Sarah Holloway is a widow who runs a stagecoach stop. Cooper says she can be trusted. Why would she help us? Swift River asked, practical even in her weakened state. According to Cooper, her husband was the first victim of Reed's son-in-law 5 years ago. He spoke out against Reed's treatment of Apache traders. They traveled through the night, keeping to game trails and avoiding the main road. The terrain was challenging, rocky slopes alternating with dense underbrush, but Wade set a pace that Swift River could maintain. By midnight, they had covered about half the distance to Holloway Station. They stopped to rest in a small clearing beside a spring, drinking deeply of the cold, clear water. The night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the occasional hoot of a hunting owl. Above them, stars crowded the sky in their countless multitudes. Swift River settled with her back against a boulder, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. Wade sat nearby, alert to any sound that might indicate pursuit. "Tell me about them," Swift River said quietly after a long silence. "Your wife and daughter." Wade hadn't spoken of his family in years, had locked away the memories because they brought too much pain. But now in the darkness, with this young woman who hummed Willow Song's lullaby, the words came. Willow Song was the daughter of a medicine man, he began, his voice low. "I met her after the war when I was working as a contract surgeon for the Army. She had been trained in her tribe's healing ways and sometimes helped at the infirmary." A smile touched his lips at the memory. She had no patience for Army regulations or for doctors who thought they knew everything. Swift River listened intently, her face illuminated by the faint moonlight filtering through the trees. "We fell in love, despite the disapproval on both sides," Wade continued. "Got married in a ceremony that combined Apache traditions with Christian ones, settled in a small village where her family lived." He paused, the painful part of the story approaching. Lily was born a year later, smart as a whip, stubborn as her mother. She loved climbing trees and swimming in the creek. Wanted to be a healer like both her parents. "What happened to them?" Swift River asked gently. Wade's expression darkened. "I was away treating an outbreak of fever in a settlement 2 days' ride from our village. While I was gone, raiders attacked. By the time I returned, it was over. 27 dead, including Willow Song. The survivors told me Lily had been with her mother in their home when it was burned." He fell silent, the familiar grief washing over him anew. Swift River didn't speak, allowing him space to collect himself. "I buried them together under a cottonwood tree," he finally said. "The leaf pendant was shaped like its leaves. Lily loved that tree. After the funeral, I couldn't stay. Too many memories. I headed into the mountains and never went back." Swift River touched the jade pendant at her throat, her expression troubled. "And now you find a stranger wearing a necklace like your daughter's, humming her mother's song." "Yes. What does your heart tell you?" Wade looked at her directly, seeing features that could belong to the child he had lost, or could simply be the common characteristics of her people. "My heart has been silent for 15 years, he said honestly. "I'm not sure I trust it to speak truth now." Swift River nodded, accepting this answer. "Then we will let time reveal what is true." She stared up at the stars. "The Apache believe that the spirits of the dead shine down from the night sky watching over us. Perhaps your wife and daughter have guided our paths to cross." Before Wade could respond, a distant sound caught his attention, the rhythmic thud of hooves on packed earth. He rose quickly, signaling for Swift River to remain silent as he moved to the edge of the clearing and listened. "Riders," he whispered when he returned to her side. "At least 3 moving fast along the main trail. Blackburns. Maybe. We need to move deeper into the brush, away from any paths they might follow." They gathered their meager supplies and proceeded cautiously through the darkened forest, Wade leading the way with the sure instinct of a seasoned hunter. The sound of horses faded as they put distance between themselves and the trail. For hours they pushed on, stopping only when Swift River's strength began to fail. By dawn, they had reached the outskirts of a small valley where Holloway Station stood, a sturdy 2-story structure with a barn and corral situated where 2 seldom-used trails converged. Wade surveyed the area carefully before approaching. A stagecoach was parked in front of the station, its team unhitched and presumably in the barn. No other visitors were evident. "Wait here," he told Swift River, concealing her in a stand of scrub oak. "I'll make sure it's safe." He approached the station openly, his rifle held non-threateningly at his side. A woman emerged onto the porch before he reached the steps, tall and lean with iron-gray hair, pulled back severely from a face weathered by sun and hardship. She held a shotgun with the ease of long familiarity. "That's far enough, stranger," she called, her voice as hard as her appearance. "State your business." "Nathan Cooper sent me," Wade replied, stopping as directed. "Said you might help." The woman's expression didn't change, but she lowered the shotgun slightly. Cooper's still alive then. He was when we left his place yesterday. Blackburns had us pinned down. He stayed to cover our escape. She studied him for a long moment, assessing. You'd be Jackson Wade then, the hermit surgeon from the high country. At his nod, she continued, and I'm guessing the Apache woman Reed condemned is with you. How did you know? A thin smile crossed Sarah Holloway's face. News travels. Reed's had riders out since yesterday spreading word that dangerous fugitives killed a lawman and kidnapped an Indian prisoner. She spat contemptuously into the dust. As if anyone with sense believes his lies. She gestured toward the brush where Swift River waited. Bring her in, quickly before the morning stage arrives. I've got a room where you can rest and clean up. Wade retrieved Swift River, who was nearly dead on her feet after the night's exertion. Sarah Holloway took one look at her condition and ushered them inside without further questions. The interior of the station was simple but well-maintained, a large common room with a stone fireplace, a dining area with several tables and a small bar along one wall. Stairs led to the upper floor where rooms were available for travelers. Through here, Sarah directed, leading them to a small back room furnished with a bed, washstand, and chair. It's not much, but it's private. Thank you, Swift River said, sinking gratefully onto the bed. Sarah assessed her injuries with a practiced eye. I've got salve and clean bandages, and you both look like you could use a hot meal. We're grateful for the help, Wade told her. Cooper said you have connections who might be interested in what Swift River discovered about Reed. Sarah's expression hardened. Reed took my husband with his cursed son-in-law. Claimed Thomas stole cattle, but the real crime was helping Apache traders get fair prices for their goods. She moved to the doorway. I'll send word to Marcus Bells in Santa Fe. He's been building a case against Reed for years. A lawman? Wade asked. Used to be a bounty hunter, Sarah replied. Now he writes for newspapers and collects evidence against men like Reed. If anyone can help bring that devil down, it's Bell. She left them to rest while she prepared food. Wade helped Swift River clean her wounds and apply fresh bandages before stepping outside to wash the grime of travel from his own face and hands. When he returned, Swift River was standing by the small window, gazing out at the rising sun. The light caught the jade pendant at her throat, making it glow with inner fire. We're safe for now, he told her. But Reed won't give up easily. She turned to face him, her expression solemn. No, he won't. Not while I live to expose what he's done. She touched the necklace thoughtfully. And perhaps not while you live to question who I might be. The simple statement hung in the air between them, acknowledging the unspoken connection that grew stronger with each passing hour. Wade found himself wanting to believe, even as caution counseled patience. One step at a time, he said finally. First we get you healthy, then we find evidence that will stand up in court. And then, Swift River asked, her dark eyes holding his. Then we discover the truth, Wade replied, whatever it may be. The sound of an approaching stagecoach interrupted the moment, wheels rattling, harnesses jingling, the driver calling to his team. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression urgent. Stage is early, she said. Stay out of sight. I'll bring food when the passengers are settled. She closed the door, leaving Wade and Swift River in the small room as the sounds of arrival filled the station. Through the thin walls, they could hear the bustle of passengers disembarking luggage, being unloaded, orders for food and drink being called out. Then a voice rose above the others, commanding, familiar and chilling in its implications. I'm looking for fugitives, Harlan Reed announced to the room at large. A murderous mountain man and an Apache thief. Anyone with information will be rewarded. Anyone harboring them will face the law's full punishment. Wade and Swift River exchanged glances. Their brief respite had ended. The real battle was about to begin. Sarah Holloway's face was a mask of composed indifference as she faced Judge Harlan Reed in her station's common room. Her hands remained steady as she wiped down the bar counter, betraying none of the tension that gripped her. Fugitives, you say, she remarked, her tone casual. What sort of trouble brings you all the way out here to look for them yourself, Judge? Must be important to pull you from your comfortable office in Copper Springs. Reed's silver beard caught the morning light as he surveyed the room with cold, calculating eyes. He cut an imposing figure in his black coat and vest, a heavy pistol visible at his hip. Two armed men flanked him, not the Blackburn brothers Wade noted through a crack in the door, but hired guns with the hard look of men who killed for pay. The woman stole sensitive documents containing territorial business arrangements, Reed replied. The man murdered a respected citizen while breaking her free from lawful custody. Such crimes demand my personal attention. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Murdered who exactly? Nathan Cooper. Shot down in cold blood when he refused to surrender the Apache woman. From their hiding place, Wade clenched his fists, rage building at the blatant lie. Swift River placed a restraining hand on his arm, her touch cool against his burning skin. Nathan Cooper. Sarah's voice revealed genuine surprise, though Wade suspected it was at the audacity of the lie rather than the news itself. That's hard to believe, Judge. Cooper was no fool to get himself killed over an Indian. Reed's eyes narrowed slightly. You knew Cooper. Everyone in these parts knew him, Sarah replied with a shrug. Former lawman kept to himself mostly. Stopped here for supplies now and then. She picked up another glass to polish. When did this happen? Yesterday morning. The fugitives fled east afterward. Reed stepped closer to the bar, lowering his voice. Mrs. Holloway, your station is the only civilized stop for 30 miles. If they came this way, you would have seen them. Sarah met his gaze steadily. Had a lot of travelers lately, stage just arrived, and before that there was a cattle buyer heading to Santa Fe 2 days ago. No one matching your description, though. She glanced toward the staircase. You're welcome to check the guest rooms, if you don't believe me. It was a calculated risk. The rooms upstairs were empty, and offering them for inspection suggested she had nothing to hide. Reed seemed to consider it before shaking his head. That won't be necessary. I trust your word, Mrs. Holloway. The statement hung in the air, clearly false to both speaker and listener, but part of the dance of power and deception that governed their interaction. Will you and your men be staying for a meal? Sarah asked, changing the subject. Cook's just made fresh biscuits and ham. We have ground to cover, Reed declined, but we'll take supplies for the road. While Sarah assembled provisions, Reed paced the common room, pausing occasionally to study the few wanted posters tacked to the wall or to gaze out the windows at the surrounding terrain. His manner was unhurried, but Wade recognized the predatory assessment in his movements. After what seemed an eternity, Reed and his men departed, the sound of their horses fading into the distance. Sarah waited a full 10 minutes before entering the back room where Wade and Swift River remained hidden. He's testing me, she said without preamble, closing the door behind her. Watching for any reaction that would confirm you're here. Cooper's alive, Wade asked, hope edging his voice. Sarah shook her head. I don't know. Reed's a liar, but that doesn't mean Cooper survived. She placed a tray of food on the small table, ham biscuits and coffee that smelled better than anything Wade had encountered in months. Eat quickly. You need to move soon. Reed will be back. You think he suspects? Swift River asked, already reaching for the food with the hunger of someone who had been near starvation. Reed suspects everyone, Sarah replied grimly. He didn't get where he is by being trusting. And he knows my history, knows Tom died under his son-in-law. He'll have men watching the station by nightfall. Wade considered their options while he ate. We need to reach Santa Fe, he decided. Find this Marcus Bell that Cooper mentioned. Sarah nodded. Bell's your best hope. He's been gathering evidence against Reed and his associates for years, testimony from families of victims, financial records showing suspicious transactions. How do we find him? You don't. I send word and he finds you. Sarah moved to a loose floorboard in the corner and pried it up, revealing a hidden compartment. From it, she withdrew a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. But first you need a safer place to wait. She unfolded the cloth to reveal a hand-drawn map. 3 miles south of here is an old Apache burial cave. Few white men know of it, and those who do avoid it out of superstition. You'll be safe there until Bell can come. Swift River studied the map, her expression troubled. Such places are sacred to my people. Your people helped my Tom when Reed's men were hunting him, Sarah said softly, before they caught him. The medicine man showed us this place, said it would shield us from evil eyes. We never needed it, but I kept the map. She looked directly at Swift River. I think they would understand the necessity now. Swift River held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Yes, the ancestors would not turn away one who fights the same enemy. Sarah collected a few essentials for them, food, water, blankets, and medical supplies. There's a small spring inside the cave, she explained, and game in the surrounding forest if you hunt quietly. With luck, Bell will reach you within 3 days. And if he doesn't? Wade asked. Sarah's face hardened. Then you're on your own. Head for the territorial capital and find Judge William Parker. He's no friend of Reed's, and he has the authority to issue arrest warrants even for someone as powerful as the judge. They prepared to leave as soon as darkness fell, using the intervening hours to rest and plan. Wade cleaned and oiled his Winchester while Swift River studied Cooper's notes on Reed's operations, committing key details to memory in case they lost the physical documents. As the sun began its descent, Sarah came to them with fresh clothing, a simple dress for Swift River, and a worn but serviceable shirt for Wade. The stage brought mail, she said, handing Swift River a folded newspaper. Thought you should see this. The newspaper was the Copper Springs Gazette, dated the previous day. The headline turned Wade's blood cold. Apache woman escapes justice with aid of mountain killer. The article beneath detailed how Swift River, described as a known thief and agitator, had been freed from lawful custody by Wade, characterized as a deranged hermit with Indian sympathies. It claimed they had murdered Nathan Cooper when he tried to apprehend them and were believed to be heading toward Apache territory to incite rebellion. He's building a narrative, Wade observed grimly, making sure that if we're seen, we'll be shot on sight. There's more, Sarah said, tapping another story lower on the page. Read that. The smaller article announced increased Army patrols along the Apache reservation boundaries following credible reports of weapons stockpiling and potential uprising. Reed was quoted praising the military's necessary precautions in these dangerous times. Swift River's face hardened as she read. He creates fear of my people to distract from his crimes. If blood flows, it will serve his purpose. All the more reason to reach Bell quickly, Sarah said, taking back the newspaper. The man has contacts in Washington who might prevent the situation from escalating. As dusk deepened into night, Sarah helped them slip out through the root cellar, which connected to a drainage culvert beneath the station's foundation. They emerged in a dry creek bed 50 yards behind the main building, hidden from the road by a stand of cottonwoods. Follow the creek south until you reach the three-peaked hill, Sarah instructed, pointing into the darkness. The cave entrance is on the eastern face, hidden behind a fall of rock. God go with you both. Wade clasped her hand briefly. Thank you. We won't forget this. Don't thank me, she replied softly. Just make sure Reed pays for what he's done. All of it. They moved swiftly through the night, Wade setting a pace that respected Swift River's still recovering strength. The moon was a thin crescent, providing just enough light to navigate by without making them visible to any watching eyes. They kept to the creek bed where the soft sand muffled their footsteps, stopping occasionally to listen for pursuit. 3 hours of steady travel brought them to the landmark Sarah had described, a hill with 3 distinct peaks silhouetted against the star-filled sky. They approached its eastern face, cautiously searching for the hidden entrance among tumbled boulders and scrub brush. Swift River found at first a narrow opening behind a screen of fallen rock, barely wide enough for a person to slip through sideways. Inside, the passage widened immediately into a chamber large enough to stand in, with smaller tunnels branching off deeper into the hill. Wade struck a match to the brief flare, revealing walls decorated with ancient pictographs, stylized figures of animals and humans, handprints in red ochre zigzag lines representing water or lightning. He lit a small candle from Sarah's supplies, and they moved farther into the cave system. These markings are very old, Swift River said, her voice hushed with respect. From the ancient ones who came before even the Apache. They followed the sound of water to a chamber where a small spring bubbled from the rock, forming a clear pool before disappearing into the stone floor. The air was cool and damp, smelling faintly of minerals. This will do, Wade decided, setting down their packs. Defensible entrance water source and impossible to spot from outside. They established a simple camp, spreading blankets on the smooth stone floor and arranging their supplies. The cave's constant temperature would protect them from both the day's heat and the night's chill. Swift River sat cross-legged by the pool, her fingers trailing in the water. This is a place of power, she said quietly. My people believe such caves connect our world to the spirit realm. Wade settled nearby, tending the small candle flame. Do you believe that? She considered before answering. I was raised by the Bennetts from age 9. They were Christian missionaries who took me in after the raid. I learned their prayers, their Bible. She gazed at the ancient paintings surrounding them. But yes, I feel something here that their teachings cannot explain. And before the Bennetts, what do you remember? Swift River closed her eyes, her face a study in concentration. Fragments only, a village by a stream, women grinding corn, men returning from hunting. Her expression softened. A woman singing as she weaves, the song I hummed for you. Willow Song. Wade said the name still painful to speak. Perhaps. Swift River opened her eyes, studying him in the flickering light. Or perhaps another woman who knew the same lullaby. Many Apache mothers sing it. It was a gentle caution against hoping too much too soon. Wade appreciated her honesty even as part of him longed to believe. Tell me about the raid, he asked. What do you remember? Her hand went unconsciously to the jade pendant. Shouting, gunfire, the woman my mother I think hiding me beneath floor coverings in our home. She gave me this necklace, told me it would protect me. Swift River's voice grew distant. Then smoke. Men's voices speaking English. One wore a kerchief over his face, but his eyes, she shuddered. Cold, like looking at death. What happened next? I was pulled from hiding. Carried away. I remember the village burning behind us. She shook her head, then nothing clear until the Bennetts. They told me I was brought to their mission by a trader who said he'd found me wandering alone. Wade absorbed this, comparing it to what he knew of the attack on his family's village. The details matched in broad strokes, but there were discrepancies too. In the version he'd been told, the home where Willow Song and Lily had sheltered had burned completely, leaving no survivors. Did the Bennetts give you the name Swift River? He asked. She shook her head. They called me Ruth. When I was 18, I left them to search for my true heritage. An old Apache woman in Santa Fe told me my birth name was Swift River. She recognized certain marks on my skin, a small scar here. She touched her collarbone and the pattern of a birthmark on my shoulder. Wade felt his heart quicken. Lily had had a small scar on her collarbone from a fall when she was 5, and a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her right shoulder. May I see? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. Swift River hesitated only briefly before drawing aside the collar of her dress to reveal a thin white scar, precisely where Wade remembered his daughter's being. Then she turned, slightly exposing her right shoulder, where a dark birthmark curved in the unmistakable shape of a crescent moon. Wade sat very still, fighting to maintain composure as certainty crystallized within him. These were not coincidences. No trader's tale of finding a wandering child could explain the necklace, the song, the scar, the birthmark. Swift River was Lily, his daughter, somehow survived when all had believed her dead. You see something familiar, Swift River observed, reading his expression. Yes, Wade admitted, his voice thick with emotion. My daughter had those exact marks. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft music of the spring. What does this mean? Swift River finally asked. For us, Wade considered carefully before answering. The truth was a fragile thing easily damaged by haste or presumption. It means we have more questions than answers, he said, but also more reason to find those answers. She accepted this measured response, neither embracing nor rejecting the possibility that had opened before them. Reed may be the key, she said, returning to the immediate threat. He has been in this region for over 20 years. If there is a connection between the raid on my village and the raid on yours, then he might know about it, Wade finished, or even have orchestrated it. Swift River nodded. His hatred of the Apache runs deep, and he has profited from our suffering for many years. They spent the next hours reviewing Cooper's notes, looking for patterns that might connect Reed to the attack 15 years earlier. The documents detailed various suspicious activities, land seizures, unexplained disappearances, financial transactions with no apparent legitimate purpose. But nothing specifically linked Reed to the raid on Wade's family's village. We need more information, Wade concluded as they carefully refolded the papers. Bell might have the missing pieces. Or Cooper, Swift River added, if he survived. They established a watch rotation, though the cave's isolation made discovery unlikely. Wade took the first shift, sitting near the entrance where he could observe the narrow approach while still keeping the camp within view. The night passed uneventfully. In the morning, Wade ventured outside briefly to set snares in the surrounding forest. By midday, they had caught 2 rabbits, which they cooked over a small, smokeless fire of dry twigs deep within the cave, where the flames wouldn't be visible from outside. The routine established itself over the next 2 days: careful foraging, minimal movement, outside constant vigilance. Swift River's strength returned rapidly, her resilience remarkable given what she had endured. They spoke little of the possibility that she might be Lily, as if by mutual agreement they had decided to wait for more concrete evidence before confronting such a momentous revelation. On the 3rd day, as Wade returned from checking his snares, he noticed fresh tracks in the soft earth near the cave entrance, boot prints that weren't his own, heading directly toward their sanctuary. He drew his pistol and approached cautiously, every sense alert. The tracks led straight to the hidden opening, then disappeared inside. Someone had found them. Wade slipped through the entrance, staying low and to one side where the shadows were deepest. He could hear voices echoing from the main chamber, Swift River, and a man, their tones conversational rather than confrontational. He moved silently through the passage until he could see them. Swift River sat by the spring, apparently at ease. Across from her was a man Wade didn't recognize, tall and lean, with close-cropped dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore trail clothes and a gun belt with a Colt revolver, but his hands were empty and his manner relaxed. "Your friend is very quiet," the stranger remarked without turning. "I heard him enter 30 seconds ago, and he still hasn't announced himself." Wade stepped into view, his pistol lowered but ready. "You have the advantage of me, sir." The man turned, revealing a face marked by a diagonal scar across the left cheek. "Marcus Bell," he introduced himself, rising smoothly to his feet. "Sarah Holloway sent word you were expecting me." Wade holstered his weapon slowly. "How did you find us?" "I've known about this cave for years," Bell replied. "Used it myself once when certain parties in Santa Fe wanted me dead." He gestured to the pictographs on the walls. "Fascinating place. The ancient ones believed it was a gateway between worlds." Swift River studied Bell with undisguised interest. "You know our history." "I make it my business to know many histories, especially those written out of the official record." Bell reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a flask, offering it to Wade. "Whiskey, you look like you could use it." Wade accepted the flask and took a measured sip, feeling the burn of good liquor, a luxury he had almost forgotten during his years in the mountains. "Sarah said you've been building a case against Reed." Bell nodded, reclaiming the flask. 3 years of work. Testimony from families of his victims, financial records showing bribes and embezzlement, evidence of his involvement in human trafficking. His expression darkened. "Reed has powerful friends, including the territorial governor. Taking him down requires overwhelming proof and the right political moment." "And we've stumbled into the middle of your investigation," Wade surmised. "Not stumbled," Bell corrected. "Accelerated. Swift River here has provided the missing piece, direct evidence of Reed's involvement in selling Apache women and children to mining operations in Mexico." Swift River nodded. "The ledgers I saw in his office listed names, ages, prices. Women between 16 and 30 bringing the highest prices." Bell's face hardened. "Such operations have existed in the borderlands for generations, but Reed's enterprise is unusually systematic. He creates pretexts to arrest Apache women, then instead of the official punishment, they simply disappear. And my discovery threatens to expose everything," Swift River concluded. "Precisely. Which is why he's willing to go to such lengths to silence you, including fabricating charges of murder and inciting rebellion." Bell took another sip from his flask. "Cooper's notes mention you believe Swift River might be your long-lost daughter." Wade glanced at Swift River, surprised that Cooper had included such a personal speculation in his official documentation. "There are similarities that raise questions." Bell studied them both thoughtfully. "I may be able to help with that as well. I've been investigating Reed's activities going back 20 years, including reports of raids on Apache villages that appeared to target specific individuals." "Such as my wife?" Wade asked sharply. "Possibly. Reed has a pattern of eliminating those who oppose his interests. Your wife was known for encouraging trade between her people and white settlers, trade that bypassed Reed's monopoly on local commerce." Bell reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. "This might interest you." The paper was a faded telegraph from 15 years earlier, addressed to Reed from someone identified only as J. The brief message read, "Raid successful, WS eliminated, child acquired as instructed, proceeding to rendezvous." Wade felt the blood drain from his face. WS could be Willow Song, and child acquired suggests a specific target beyond random violence. Bell agreed. It's not definitive, but together with the other evidence Cooper collected, he trailed off, allowing Wade to draw his own conclusions. Swift River had gone very still, her eyes fixed on the telegram. "You believe Reed ordered the raid that killed my mother, killed Willow Song," she said softly, "and arranged for me to be taken." "It fits his pattern," Bell confirmed, though without more evidence it remained speculation. Wade's mind raced, connecting fragments that had never before aligned. "The Bennetts," he said suddenly, "the missionaries who raised Swift River. How did they come to be in possession of an Apache child?" Bell nodded, following his reasoning. "According to my investigation, the Bennetts received substantial financial support from a charitable foundation established by Reed. They took in several orphaned Indian children over the years, with the stated aim of Christianizing and civilizing them. A convenient cover for disposing of children who survived his raids," Wade concluded bitterly. "Separate them from their culture, raise them to reject their heritage. And in this case, keep the daughter of his enemy where he could monitor her." Swift River added, her body steady despite the horrifying implications. "The Bennetts often received visits from Reed when I was growing up. He always took particular interest in my education and progress." The revelation sent a chill through Wade. "He's known who you are all along." "It seems likely," Bell agreed, "which makes your current situation even more precarious. Reed isn't just protecting his criminal enterprises, he's preserving a deception 15 years in the making." The full weight of their adversaries' resources and determinations settled over the cave's occupants. Reed had wealth, political connections, and the facade of legal authority. Against that, they had Cooper's notes, Swift River's testimony, and Bell's accumulated evidence. "What's our next move?" Wade asked finally. Bell considered before answering. "We need to get you both to Santa Fe. I have contacts there, a federal judge named Parker, who's been looking for an opportunity to investigate territorial corruption, and a newspaper editor willing to publish the truth regardless of threats. Reed will have men watching the roads," Swift River pointed out. "Yes, but he doesn't know I'm involved yet," Bell replied. "I have a wagon arriving tomorrow with a shipment of supplies for the Navajo agency. You'll travel hidden among the cargo. It's not comfortable, but it's relatively safe." "And once we're in Santa Fe," Wade asked, "you'll give sworn testimony before Judge Parker. Combined with the evidence I've already gathered, it should be enough for him to issue federal warrants, even for someone as connected as Reed." Bell's expression was grim but determined. "It won't be easy. Reed will fight with every resource at his disposal. But it's our best chance for justice." They spent the remainder of the day planning the journey. Bell had brought fresh supplies, including ammunition for Wade's Winchester and proper medicines to replace Sarah's homemade remedies. As they ate a simple meal of jerky and hardtack, Bell shared what he knew of recent developments. "Reed's convinced the territorial militia that an Apache uprising is imminent," he told them. "He's using the story of your escape, Swift River, as evidence of coordination between hostile elements both on and off the reservation." "Has there been violence?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. Bell nodded soberly. "A patrol clashed with hunters from the reservation yesterday. 2 Apache dead, 1 militiaman wounded. Reed's newspaper called it the first skirmish in a coming war." Wade cursed under his breath. He's manufacturing a conflict to distract from his crimes. "And to justify harsher measures against the Apache," Swift River added. "If full-scale fighting erupts, no one will listen to accusations against Reed, especially from an Apache woman." "Exactly why we need to move quickly," Bell agreed. "The wagon will arrive at the North Ridge by dawn. We leave as soon as it's loaded." They took turns resting through the night, maintaining a watch at the cave entrance. Wade found sleep elusive, his mind churning with the implications of Bell's revelations. If Reed had orchestrated the raid that killed Willow Song and separated him from his daughter for 15 years, then this was no longer just about justice for Swift River or exposing corruption. It had become deeply, irrevocably personal. He watched Swift River as she slept, searching her features for traces of the child he had lost. In repose, with the hard determination softened by sleep, He could more easily see the resemblance to both himself and Willowsong, the shape of her brow, the curve of her cheek, small details that genetics had preserved despite the passage of time. Whether conclusive proof ever emerged or not, Wade had already accepted the truth in his heart. This woman was his daughter, restored to him by a twist of fate neither could have anticipated. The revelation filled him with both joy and rage. Joy at finding her alive, rage at the years stolen from them both. Dawn brought Bell's return from scouting the rendezvous point. "Wagons on schedule," he reported. "No sign of Reed's men, but we should move carefully. The fewer tracks we leave, the better." They packed quickly, erasing all evidence of their stay. Swift River paused by the spring, dipping her fingers into the clear water in a gesture that seemed half practical, half ritualistic. "Thank you," she murmured, to the cave that had sheltered them before following the men into the pale morning light. Bell led them along a circuitous route that utilized natural features, rocky outcroppings, dry stream beds, stands of pine to minimize their trail. They traveled in silence, communicating with hand signals when necessary. By mid-morning, they had reached a ridge overlooking a narrow valley where a canvas-topped wagon waited its mule team grazing nearby. The driver, a grizzled man Bell introduced only as Hank greeted them with a taciturn nod. "Got everything arranged," he reported, indicating the wagon's contents. "False bottom under the flour sacks. Tight fit, but it'll get you past any checkpoints." Wade examined the hiding place, a shallow compartment running the length of the wagon bed, barely high enough for a person to lie flat. It would be cramped, airless, and uncomfortable, especially over the rough roads to Santa Fe. "It's a 2-day journey at best," Bell warned, noting Wade's expression. "3 if we encounter trouble. You'll only be in there when we're near settlements or checkpoints." Swift River showed no hesitation, already preparing to enter the compartment. "I've endured worse for less important reasons," she said simply. They arranged themselves in the narrow space, lying side by side with barely enough room to shift position. Hank and Bell covered them with heavy canvas, then began loading flour sacks and supply crates on top until they were completely concealed beneath hundreds of pounds of cargo. The wagon jolted into motion, beginning the long journey to Santa Fe. In the stifling darkness of their hiding place, Wade found Swift River's hand and squeezed it reassuringly. She returned the pressure, a silent acknowledgement of shared purpose and determination. For hours, they endured the swaying, bumping progress of the wagon over rutted trails. Occasionally, they heard voices as the vehicle passed other travelers, but no one stopped or questioned them. By late afternoon, when the wagon finally halted and Bell removed enough cargo for them to emerge, they were stiff and drenched in sweat. "We've cleared the checkpoint at Cedar Creek," Bell informed them as they gratefully stretched their cramped muscles. "Should be safe to ride on top until nightfall." They had stopped in a small clearing beside a stream shouldered from the road by a stand of cottonwoods. Hank prepared coffee while Bell spread a map on the wagon seat, tracing their route with a calloused finger. "We're here," he indicated. "Santa Fe is still 40 miles southeast. If we push through the night, we could reach it by tomorrow evening." "What about Reed's men?" Wade asked, scanning the surrounding terrain with habitual caution. "They're concentrated around Copper Springs and the reservation," Bell replied. "But he'll have informants in every settlement between here and Santa Fe. That's why we're avoiding the main road." Swift River, who had been washing trail dust from her face in the stream, suddenly went still. "Riders," she said quietly, her keen hearing detecting what the others had missed. "Coming fast from the north." Bell was instantly alert, his hand moving to his revolver. "Hank, get the team ready. Wade, Swift River back in the compartment. Now." They scrambled to comply, but before they could secure the hiding place, 5 riders appeared at the edge of the clearing. Wade recognized the Blackburn brothers at the front, flanked by 3 hard-faced men with rifles ready. "Well now," Luke Blackburn called, reining in his horse. "Isn't this a pleasant surprise?" Marcus Bell, the famous reporter, out for a country drive. His gaze shifted to Wade and Swift River, a cold smile spreading beneath his mustache. "And with such interesting company." Bell positioned himself between the newcomers and the wagon, his manner relaxed despite the tension evident in his stance. "Blackburn, still doing Reed's dirty work, I see." "It pays well," Luke replied with a shrug. "And today it pays very well indeed. Reed's offering 1,000 for these 2 dead or alive." He nodded toward Wade and Swift River. "Though I expect he'd prefer dead considering what they know." "You're outnumbered and outgunned," Bell stated calmly. "Ride away now and we'll forget this happened." Ezra Blackburn laughed, the sound devoid of humor. Count again, Bell. 5 of us, 3 of you, and one's an old man, and another's a woman. He raised his rifle slightly. I like those odds just fine. What happened next unfolded with the precision of a well-rehearsed performance. Wade dropped to one knee, his Winchester coming up in a smooth arc as Bell drew and fired in the same motion. Hank, belying his apparent age, produced a shotgun from beneath the wagon seat. The clearing erupted in gunfire. Wade's first shot caught one of the unnamed riders in the chest, knocking him from his saddle. Bell's bullet found Ezra Blackburn's shoulder, spinning him halfway around, but not dismounting him. The remaining men scattered for cover, returning fire from behind trees and boulders. Swift River pulled Wade behind the wagon as bullets splintered the wood around them. There's a rifle in the supplies, she said, pointing to a crate that had been dislodged in the chaos. Wade retrieved the weapon, a Spencer repeating rifle, and tossed it to her. She handled it with unexpected familiarity, working the action and taking aim in one fluid motion. The Bennetts believed in self-defense, she explained, noting his surprise as she fired at a gunman trying to flank their position. The battle settled into a deadly pattern of advance and retreat, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. Bell and Hank were pinned down near the stream, while Wade and Swift River used the wagon for cover. The Blackburns and their remaining man had good positions among the trees, making them difficult targets. "We're burning daylight," Luke Blackburn shouted after 20 minutes of stalemate. "And my brother needs attention. How about a deal, Bell?" "I'm listening," Bell called back, reloading his revolver. "Give us the Apache woman. You and Wade can ride free. Reed doesn't care about you, just her and what she knows." Bell glanced at Wade, who shook his head emphatically. "No deal, Blackburn," Bell responded. "All of us ride out or none of us do." "Have it your way," Luke replied, his voice hardening. "But remember, I offered a choice." A tense silence fell over the clearing, broken only by the nervous whickering of the horses tied behind the wagon. Wade used the moment to assess their situation, ammunition running low, daylight fading, and no clear path to escape without abandoning the wagon. A sudden movement caught his eye, Swift River slipping away from the wagon's protection, moving with the silent grace of a hunting cat toward the trees where the Blackburns were positioned. "Swift River," he hissed, but she was already beyond hearing, her form blending into the lengthening shadows. Before he could follow, gunfire erupted again from the Blackburns' position. Wade returned fire, trying to provide covering fire for Swift River, while having no clear idea what she intended. Bell and Hank joined in, creating a crossfire that kept the attackers' heads down. Minutes passed with no sign of Swift River. Wade's concern mounted with each passing second. Then, just as the light was beginning to fail completely, a scream cut through the gunfire, a man's voice, high and terrified. The shooting from the Blackburns' position ceased abruptly. In the sudden silence, they heard thrashing among the trees, followed by another cry that ended in a gurgling sound. "Luke, Ezra!" called the remaining gunman, his voice betraying fear. When no answer came, he fired wildly into the gathering darkness before breaking cover and running toward his horse. Wade's shot caught him in the leg, dropping him 10 feet short of his mount. The man crawled desperately, reached for the stirrup, then suddenly stiffened and collapsed face first into the dirt, the handle of a knife protruding from his back. Swift River emerged from the trees, her face set in lines of grim determination. Blood spattered her clothing, none of it apparently her own. "The Blackburns," Bell asked, approaching cautiously. "Will not trouble us again," she replied, her voice flat. Wade looked at his daughter, for so he now fully accepted her to be, with a mixture of amazement and concern. This was a side of her he hadn't witnessed before, a deadly efficiency that spoke of skills no missionary education could have provided. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he asked as they gathered the attackers' weapons and ammunition. Swift River wiped her knife clean on the dead man's shirt before resheathing it. "When I left the Bennetts, I spent 2 years with my mother's people before returning to the white world. The old ones taught me many things, including how to kill when necessary." The matter-of-fact statement hung in the air as they prepared to resume their journey. Hank righted the wagon while Bell dragged the bodies into the underbrush. They would be discovered eventually, but by then, with luck, they would be safely in Santa Fe. "We need to assume Reed knows we're heading for the territorial capital," Bell said as they set out again, this time with Wade and Swift River riding the dead men's horses alongside the wagon. "He'll have men watching every approach." "Then we need a different destination," Wade suggested. "Somewhere Reed wouldn't expect." Bell considered this, then nodded slowly. There's a rancho 20 miles east of here. Belongs to Eduardo Salazar, no friend of Reed's. His land extends to the foothills where a trail leads through the mountains to Santa Fe. It's longer but much less traveled. You trust this Salazar? Wade asked. With my life, Bell confirmed. He's lost family to Reed's schemes as well. They traveled through the night avoiding roads and settlements. The moon provided enough light to navigate by, though their progress was slow over the difficult terrain. Swift River rode silently, her face shadowed by the events at the clearing. Whatever inner conflict she might be experiencing, she kept it private. Dawn found them approaching a sprawling adobe compound nestled against the eastern foothills. Smoke rose from several chimneys, and corrals full of horses spoke of prosperity unusual for the region. Bell led them to a side gate rather than the main entrance, where a young Mexican man recognized him immediately and admitted them without question. They were conducted to an interior courtyard, their horses and wagon taken care of by silent, efficient hands. Eduardo Salazar proved to be a dignified man in his 60s, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who had spent a lifetime under the southwestern sun. He greeted Bell with a warm embrace before turning his attention to the others. "My home is yours," he said in lightly accented English, after Bell had made introductions and briefly explained their situation. Any enemy of Reed's is a friend of the Salazar family. They were provided with rooms to rest and clean up, followed by the first proper meal any of them had enjoyed in days. As they ate in the cool dining hall, Salazar outlined the situation in the territory as he understood it. Reed has convinced the governor that an Apache uprising is imminent. He informed them, confirming Bell's earlier report. Troops are being moved toward the reservation and settlers are forming militias. It is a powder keg needing only a spark. Created deliberately to divert attention from his crimes, Swift River observed bitterly. Salazar nodded, his expression grave. Si, señorita. Reed has always used fear of the Apache to advance his interests. When people are afraid, they do not question those who promise protection. We need to reach Judge Parker before this escalates further, Bell said. Do you think the mountain trail is still clear? For now, Salazar replied. But Reed has spies everywhere. You must move quickly. He turned to Wade. I knew your wife, Senor. Willow Song was a woman of great courage. She helped my daughter during a difficult childbirth when no doctor would come to a Mexican home. Wade was surprised by the connection. You recognize Swift River. Salazar smiled gently. The resemblance is there for those with eyes to see. And Bell had written to me of the possibility. He regarded Swift River with kindly interest. You have your mother's strength, child, and her eyes. Swift River accepted this observation with quiet dignity, though Wade noticed she seemed touched by the personal connection to her mother. They rested through the day, preparing for the final leg of their journey to Santa Fe. Salazar provided fresh horses and supplies, including proper clothing that would allow them to blend in once they reached the city. Bell spent hours writing, documenting their experiences and connecting them to his broader investigation of Reed's activities. As evening approached, Wade found Swift River in the rancho's small garden, seated on a stone bench beneath a flowering almond tree. She was staring at the distant mountains, her expression contemplative. Are you all right? He asked, joining her on the bench. You've been quiet since the clearing. She didn't immediately answer, her fingers tracing the outline of the jade pendant that had become a talisman of sorts. I killed 2 men yesterday, she said finally. Not in blind defense, but with calculation. I tracked them, waited for the right moment, and took their lives. She looked at him directly. What does that make me? Wade considered his response carefully. A survivor, he said. Someone who does what's necessary when faced with those who would do worse without hesitation. The Bennetts taught me that all life is sacred, she continued, that God alone should decide when a person's time has ended. And what did your time with your mother's people teach you? A small smile touched her lips. That life and death are part of the same circle. That taking a life carries a weight the hunter must bear with respect. Her expression sobered. But I wonder if Lily Wade and Swift River would make the same choices. If one is more truly who I am than the other. It was the first time she had explicitly acknowledged the possibility of her dual identity, the child of Willow Song and Jackson Wade, and the Apache woman raised by missionaries. The question revealed the depth of her internal struggle. Perhaps both are equally real, Wade suggested gently. Just as I am both the army surgeon I once was and the mountain hermit I became after losing your mother. He paused, weighing his next words. If you are my Lily, and in my heart I believe you are, then know this, your mother and I never wanted you to be only one thing or another. We hoped you would draw strength from both your heritages. Swift River nodded slowly, absorbing this. And what of afterward? If we succeed against Reed, what then? That will be your choice, Wade replied honestly. I've lived too long with ghosts to presume to direct your path now. She seemed satisfied with this answer, rising from the bench as the last light faded from the sky. We should rest. Tomorrow will test us all. They departed the rancho before dawn, guided by one of Salazar's vaqueros who knew the mountain trail intimately. The path was steep and narrow in places, requiring them to proceed single file through pine forests and across rocky slopes. By midday, they had reached a pass that offered their first view of Santa Fe. In the distance, a sprawl of adobe buildings surrounding the central plaza dominated by the spire of the cathedral. 6 hours more, if we push hard, their guide estimated, pointing to where the trail descended toward the city. But there is a problem. He indicated a plume of dust rising from the main road below, riders moving rapidly toward Santa Fe. Bell studied the dust cloud through his field glasses, his expression darkening. Militia, he reported. At least 20 men riding under Reed's authority by the look of the flag they're carrying. He's going to reach the city before us, Wade realized. Warn his allies, prepare for our arrival. Or worse, Swift River added, create an incident that would justify martial law preventing any testimony before Judge Parker. Bell considered their options, his face grim. We need to split up, he decided. I'll take the direct route into the city with the evidence we've gathered. Reed knows my face, but I can still move more freely than either of you. While we do what? Wade asked. Circle around to the eastern entrance. There's a small church there, San Miguel. The priest, Father Ignacio, is sympathetic to our cause. He'll shelter you until I can arrange a meeting with Parker. It wasn't ideal, but under the circumstances, it seemed the most prudent course. They divided the documentation, with Bell taking Cooper's notes and his own extensive records, while Wade secured the telegram in Swift River's written testimony in his saddlebags. Their guide led them to where the trail forked one branch, continuing toward the city's main entrance, the other winding eastward toward the poorer districts where adobe gave way to more modest dwellings of stone and timber. God go with you, Bell said as they prepared to part ways. If all goes well, we'll meet at the church by nightfall. If I haven't arrived by dawn and assume I've been detained and proceed to the federal building, ask for Judge Parker, directly, accept no substitutes. With that, he spurred his horse down the western fork, moving at a pace that would bring him to the city well ahead of the approaching militia. Wade and Swift River, guided by the vaquero, took the less direct route, traveling through ravines and dry creek beds to avoid being spotted from the main road. The sun was low on the horizon when they reached the eastern outskirts of Santa Fe. Their guide left them at the edge of a modest neighborhood, pointing out the small stone church with its weathered wooden cross. Father Ignacio expects you, he said before turning back toward the mountains. Vaya con Dios. They approached the church, cautiously alert for any sign of surveillance. The building was quiet, its heavy wooden doors standing slightly ajar in welcome. Inside, candles flickered in iron holders, casting warm light on whitewashed walls and simple wooden pews. A priest emerged from a side door as they entered, a tall, thin man with kind eyes and a gentle manner. You must be Wade and Swift River, he greeted them. Marcus sent word you might come. Father Ignacio led them to a small room behind the altar, furnished simply with a table, chairs, and a narrow bed. It isn't much, he apologized, but it's secure. Few of Reed's men venture into this part of the city, and those who do seldom enter a church. He provided them with food and water before excusing himself to conduct evening services, promising to return afterward with news of Bell's arrival in the city. Left alone, Wade and Swift River ate in companionable silence, the weight of their journey and what lay ahead settling over them. The small room was peaceful, the sounds of hymns filtering through from the main sanctuary, providing a counterpoint to the tension they had lived with for days. It feels strange, Swift River observed, to be so close to the end of this journey, yet still uncertain of the outcome. Wade nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. They had survived Reed's initial attempt to eliminate Swift River, and discovered the possibility of their connection to each other, and gathered evidence that might bring down a powerful, corrupt official. Yet success remained balanced on a knife's edge, dependent on factors beyond their control. Whatever happens, he said quietly, I'm grateful for the chance to know you. Whether you're my Lily or not, you're a woman any father would be proud of. The simple statement seemed to touch something deep within Swift River. For the first time since he had known her, tears gathered in her eyes, though she blinked them back quickly. "Thank you," she whispered. The moment was interrupted by the return of Father Ignacio, his expression troubled. "There is news, and it is not good," he said without preamble. "Reed has declared a state of emergency in the city. He claims Apache warriors have been spotted approaching from the north." "That's impossible," Swift River protested. "The reservation is more than 50 miles away, and no war party would move against Santa Fe without cause." "Truth matters little to Reed when fear serves his purpose," the priest replied gravely. "The militia is patrolling the streets, and a curfew has been imposed. Worst Judge Parker has been detained in his home officially for his protection, but effectively under house arrest." Wade exchanged a concerned glance with Swift River. "And Bell, has he reached the city?" Father Ignacio shook his head. "There is no word, but Reed has announced that anyone harboring fugitives will be considered an enemy of the territory." He straightened his shoulders, a steely determination replacing his earlier gentleness. "Nevertheless, you are safe here. The church has sheltered the persecuted before." As night deepened, the streets outside fell silent under the curfew. Father Ignacio retired to his quarters, leaving Wade and Swift River to share the small room behind the altar. They took turns resting, when always keeping watch at the small window that overlooked the church's side yard. During his watch, Wade found himself reflecting on the strange path that had led him to this moment. 15 years of self-imposed isolation had ended the day he witnessed Swift River's condemnation. In the short time since, his world had expanded beyond recognition, filled again with purpose, connection, and the possibility of justice for wrongs long buried. Whatever tomorrow might bring, he would face it, knowing he had emerged from the shadow of his grief. Whether they succeeded against Reed or not, whether Swift River was truly his daughter, or simply a brave woman fighting the same enemy, Wade had rediscovered the will to engage with life rather than merely surviving it. As dawn approached with no sign of Bell, the decision they had dreaded became inevitable. They would have to proceed to the federal building without him, relying on the evidence they carried in their own testimony to convince whoever might listen. Father Ignacio provided them with fresh clothing. Wade dressed as a simple tradesman, Swift River in the modest attire of a Mexican servant girl, her distinctive features partially concealed by a shawl drawn across the lower part of her face. "The federal building is 3 blocks from the plaza," the priest instructed as they prepared to leave through a side door. "The streets will be filled with people heading to market, which should provide some cover. But be wary, Reed's men will be watching for strangers." Wade checked his pistol concealed beneath his loose jacket. The Winchester had been reluctantly left behind, too conspicuous for their disguise. "If we're separated," he told Swift River, "continue to the federal building. Ask for Parker, no one else." She nodded, tucking the precious documents securely inside her clothing. "And if we're discovered, then we fight," Wade replied simply. "But let's hope it doesn't come to that." They stepped out into the gray light of early morning, joining the flow of workers and merchants heading toward the city center. Santa Fe was awakening to another day seemingly ordinary, despite the undercurrent of tension. Militiamen stood at key intersections, their presence a visible reminder of the emergency Reed had declared. Wade and Swift River moved with purposeful casualness, neither hurrying nor lingering, just 2 more faces in the morning crowd. They had covered nearly 2 blocks without incident when Swift River suddenly gripped Wade's arm, her eyes fixed on something ahead. "Reed," she whispered. Sure enough, Judge Harlan Reed himself was approaching, accompanied by 2 armed men. He walked with the confident stride of someone accustomed to deference, his silver beard catching the early light as he surveyed the street with proprietary interest. There was no time to retreat without drawing attention. Wade pulled Swift River into the recessed doorway of a cobbler's shop, turning his face away from the street, while positioning himself to shield her from view. Reed and his men passed within 10 feet of their hiding place, close enough that Wade could hear the judge commenting on the admirable discipline of the townspeople in respecting the curfew. They continued toward the plaza without a backward glance. Wade released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That was too close," he murmured. "Let's move before he comes back this way." They resumed their journey more cautious, now taking a less direct route that avoided the main thoroughfares. The federal building came into view as they turned onto a side street, an imposing structure of stone and timber, the territorial flag flying from its roof. A small group of officials stood on the steps engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. Among them, Wade recognized the distinctive figure of Marcus Bell, apparently unharmed but clearly agitated as he argued with a man in a military uniform. "Bell made it," Swift River said with relief, "but something's wrong." Before they could approach, the argument on the steps concluded abruptly. Bell was seized by two soldiers, his protests ignored as he was escorted forcibly into the building. The remaining officials dispersed, leaving only armed guards at the entrance. "They've arrested him," Wade realized, "probably on Reed's orders." Swift River's expression hardened with determination. "Then we're on our own." They retreated to a small plaza a block away, blending with the morning market crowd while they considered their options. The federal building was now effectively barred to them. Approaching it directly would likely result in their immediate arrest. "We need to reach Parker directly," Wade decided. "Where does he live?" Swift River's brow furrowed in concentration as she recalled details from Bell's briefings. "North of the plaza, I think. A large house with a walled garden." It was a slim chance, but with Bell detained and Reed in control of the federal building, it seemed their only option. They made their way cautiously toward the more affluent residential district where territorial officials and wealthy merchants maintained substantial homes. The judge's residence proved easy to identify, a handsome adobe structure behind an iron gate currently guarded by two militiamen who looked bored but alert. Approaching directly was out of the question, but Wade noticed that the property backed onto an alley that appeared less well monitored. They circled around, finding a service entrance in the rear wall where deliveries were likely made. The gate was locked but not guarded, and the wall itself, while high, offered handholds in its weathered adobe surface. "Wait here," Swift River said, already preparing to climb. "I can move more quietly alone." Wade wanted to protest but recognized the logic of her plan. Swift River's Apache training had proven its value more than once during their journey. He squeezed her hand briefly. "Be careful." She scaled the wall with the fluid grace of a natural climber, disappearing over the top without a sound. Wade positioned himself in the shadows of the alley, alert for any sign of trouble from either direction. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The morning sun climbed higher, increasing the risk of discovery as the alley lost its protective shadows. Wade was beginning to fear the worst when the service gate suddenly opened from within, revealing Swift River with a finger pressed to her lips in a signal for silence. He slipped through, quickly finding himself in a well-maintained garden where fruit trees provided welcome cover. Swift River led him to a side door where an elderly man in a servant's attire waited, his weathered face betraying both concern and curiosity. "This is Miguel," Swift River whispered. "He's taking us to Judge Parker." Miguel guided them through the house's kitchen and along a corridor to a book-lined study where a distinguished-looking man sat behind a massive oak desk. William Parker was younger than Wade had expected, perhaps 50, with keen eyes and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "So you're the fugitives Reed is so desperate to silence," Parker observed, gesturing for them to sit. "Miguel says you have evidence of serious corruption." Wade nodded, noting the judge's direct manner with approval. "Evidence and testimony that connects Reed to multiple crimes, including murder and human trafficking." Swift River removed the documents from their hiding place, spreading them on the desk for Parker's inspection. "These are copies of records I saw in Reed's office detailing the sale of Apache women to mining operations in Mexico." Parker examined the papers with methodical thoroughness, his expression growing grimmer with each page he turned. "This corroborates information I've received from other sources," he said finally, "including testimony from Marcus Bell before his unfortunate arrest this morning." "You've spoken with Bell?" Wade asked eagerly. "Briefly, before Reed's men intervened. He managed to deliver his documentation in a deposition regarding your situation." Parker leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled in thought. "What Reed doesn't know is that I've been building a case against him for months in cooperation with federal authorities in Washington." Hope surged through Wade. "Then you'll issue warrants for his arrest." "I already have," Parker replied, lifting a sealed document from his desk. "The challenge is executing them. Reed controls the local militia and has convinced the territorial governor that we face an Apache uprising. Under those circumstances, attempting to arrest him could spark widespread violence. So he escapes justice because he's created a crisis," Swift River said bitterly. "Not necessarily," Parker countered. "There's a federal marshal arriving this afternoon with a detachment of troops answerable directly to Washington, not the territorial government. Once they're here, we can move against Reed with minimal risk to the public. It was the first truly promising news they had received since beginning their journey. Parker had the authority, the evidence, and soon the force necessary to end Reed's reign of corruption. Until then, the judge continued, you'll remain here as my guests. Reed has men searching every public building and many private homes, but he wouldn't dare violate the residence of a federal judge without explicit cause. Miguel showed them to a comfortable guest room where they could rest and refresh themselves after their ordeal. Food was provided along with clean clothing and the luxury of hot water for washing. For the first time in days, they could relax their vigilance, at least temporarily. As afternoon approached, Parker summoned them back to his study. His expression was grave as he gestured for them to be seated. There's been a development, he informed them without preamble. Reed has scheduled a public execution for sunset. Execution, Wade repeated, dread settling in his stomach. Who? Marcus Bell, Parker replied grimly. Charged with espionage and sedition under emergency powers Reed granted himself when he declared the state of emergency. Swift River's face paled. He can't do that. Even under territorial law, Bell is entitled to a trial. Reed is claiming that the Apache threat constitutes a military emergency, allowing for summary judgment. Parker's disgust was evident. He's using Bell as an example to silence any who might speak against him, and as a trap for you both. He expects us to try to save Bell, Wade realized. Precisely. The execution is set for the main plaza at sunset, a public spectacle designed to demonstrate Reed's power and draw you into the open. Parker's expression softened slightly. I understand your loyalty to Bell, but attempting to intervene would play directly into Reed's hands. The federal marshal will arrive within hours. Once he does, we can stop this legally. Wade exchanged a glance with Swift River, reading in her eyes the same conclusion he had reached. Bell had risked everything to help them. They could not abandon him now, regardless of the danger to themselves. We appreciate your counsel, Judge Parker, Wade said carefully, and we'll consider it carefully. Parker studied them, clearly recognizing the unspoken decision. I can't officially condone any action that might escalate tensions, he said slowly. But as a private citizen, I would understand the moral imperative to prevent an injustice. He opened a drawer and withdrew a folded document. This is a copy of the federal warrant for Reed's arrest. In the right hands at the right moment, it carries the full authority of the United States government. Wade accepted the document with a nod of understanding. Parker was providing them with a legal basis for action should they choose to take it. The marshal's name is Samuel Jeffords, Parker added. His detachment should reach the northern gate by 5 o'clock. If Reed's attention were to be diverted around that time, it might facilitate their entry into the city without confrontation. It was as close to explicit support as the judge could provide while maintaining his official position. Wade and Swift River thanked him and withdrew to plan their next move, the weight of Bell's life and the larger quest for justice resting squarely on their shoulders. The plaza of Santa Fe bustled with forced activity as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Militiamen patrolled in pairs, rifles at the ready, while citizens moved about their business with the wary efficiency of people who knew they were being watched. In the center of the square, a wooden platform had been erected, a gallows stark and purposeful against the adobe buildings surrounding the plaza. From their vantage point in an abandoned storeroom overlooking the square, Wade and Swift River observed the preparations with grim focus. They had left Judge Parker's residence an hour earlier, slipping out through the garden and making their way to this position via back alleys and service corridors. Reed isn't taking any chances, Wade noted, watching as additional guards were stationed around the perimeter. Must be 20 men at least. Swift River's gaze was fixed on the gallows. They're expecting us to make an attempt during the execution itself. That's when they'll be most alert. Which is why we moved before Bell is even brought out, Wade replied, checking the pistol he had been given by Judge Parker's groundskeeper, a heavy Colt with custom grips in a smooth action. Parker said the federal marshal should arrive by 5. It's nearly 4 now. Swift River nodded, understanding his thinking. Create a diversion to occupy Reed's forces while the marshal enters the city. Then use the confusion to free Bell. Exactly, but we need to coordinate our timing precisely. Wade unfolded a rough map of the plaza and surrounding streets that Miguel had drawn for them. The jail is here 1 block east. Bell will be brought across the plaza to the gallows, probably with an armed escort. If we could delay them leaving the jail, it would give the marshal more time to deploy his men, Swift River suggested. Good thinking. But how? Swift River considered, her fingers absently touching the jade pendant at her throat. Fire, she said finally. Not a large one, but enough smoke to suggest danger. They'll need to secure the prisoners before responding. It was a solid plan. Wade detailed the approach Swift River would create the diversion at the jail, using materials they had gathered during their journey to the plaza, while he positioned himself to intercept Bell's eventual transport. If all went well, the delay would provide just enough time for Marshal Jeffords to enter the city and establish his authority before Reed could complete his grim spectacle. As Swift River prepared to leave for the jail, Wade caught her arm gently. Be careful, he said, the simple words carrying the weight of all they had discovered about each other during their journey. Whatever happens, remember that finding you that has given me back a part of myself I thought was lost forever. She held his gaze, emotion flickering briefly across her composed features. When this is over, she replied, we'll have time to learn who we truly are to each other. With that, she slipped away, moving with the natural stealth that spoke of her Apache heritage. Wade watched until she disappeared around a corner, then turned his attention back to the plaza. Reed had arrived resplendent in a black coat with silver buttons, directing the final preparations with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. The sight of him, the architect of so much suffering, including the raid that had supposedly killed Wade's family 15 years earlier, kindled a cold fury that Wade carefully contained. Justice, not vengeance, was their purpose today. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. Wade checked his pocket watch repeatedly, calculating the time needed for Swift River to reach the jail and implement her diversion. 4:15, 4:20, 4:30. At 4:35, shouts erupted from the direction of the jail. Wade saw Reed and several militiamen turn toward the commotion, then spotted a plume of smoke rising above the rooftops. Swift River had succeeded. The effect was immediate. Reed dispatched half his force to investigate, leaving the plaza with reduced security. Wade used the distraction to move to his next position, a recessed doorway with a clear view of the route Bell would be taken along. 4:40. More commotion from the jail, suggesting that Swift River's diversion was creating the desired confusion. Reed paced the plaza with growing agitation, clearly concerned about maintaining his timetable. 4:50. A new sound reached Wade's ears, the rhythmic cadence of marching feet approaching from the northern gate. Marshal Jeffords had arrived with his detachment precisely as Judge Parker had predicted. Reed heard it too, his head snapping up like a predator scenting a rival. He issued orders to his remaining men, directing them to establish a perimeter around the plaza. Wade tensed, knowing the critical moment was approaching. Reed was being forced to divide his attention between the disturbance at the jail, the approaching federal troops, and his determination to proceed with Bell's execution. It created a vulnerability, but a narrow one, that would require perfect timing to exploit. At 4:55, the jail door opened. 4 armed guards emerged, escorting a manacled Marcus Bell. Wade noticed immediately that Bell appeared to have been beaten. His face was bruised, and he walked with a painful stiffness that suggested broken ribs. Despite his condition, Bell's expression remained defiant as he was marched toward the plaza. Wade waited until they were halfway to the gallows before making his move. Stepping from the doorway with his pistol concealed beneath his coat, he approached the procession as if he were merely a curious citizen. When he was within 10 feet, he called out in a clear voice, "Harlan Reed!" The guards turned hands, moving to their weapons. Reed, who had been watching the northern entrance to the plaza, spun to face the unexpected interruption. In the name of the United States government, Wade continued producing the warrant Parker had given him. You are under arrest for corruption, murder, and treason against the territory. For a moment, the plaza seemed frozen in tableau. Wade standing firm with the warrant extended, Reed staring in disbelief, Bell and his guards caught between them. Then Reed's surprise gave way to cold fury. "Seize him," he ordered, pointing at Wade. "This man is a murderer and fugitive." The guards hesitated, caught between Reed's command and the federal document Wade was displaying. It was all the opening Bell needed. Despite his injuries, he drove his shoulder into the nearest guard, knocking the man off balance. In the same motion, he ducked behind another guard, using his manacled hands to pull the man's pistol from its holster. The plaza erupted into chaos. Reed's militiamen rushed toward the disturbance, while citizens scattered for cover. Wade fired a warning shot into the air, then shouted again. Federal marshals are entering the city. Reed's authority is revoked by order of Washington. As if in confirmation, sound of disciplined marching grew louder, and the first ranks of federal troops appeared at the plaza's northern entrance. At their head rode a tall, broad-shouldered man in the distinctive uniform of a U.S. Marshal, his badge catching the late afternoon sun. Reed assessed the situation with the quick calculation of a man accustomed to shifting circumstances. This changes nothing, he declared, drawing his own pistol. These two are dangerous fugitives who have murdered territorial officials. The law demands their immediate execution. Marshal Jeffords reined in his horse, surveying the scene before him. I have federal warrants for the arrest of Harlan Reed, he announced in a carrying voice. All local authority is suspended pending an investigation into corruption charges. Reed's face contorted with rage. This is territorial business. You have no jurisdiction here. I have the authority of the President of the United States, Jeffords replied evenly, which supersedes any authority you claim. He turned to his men. Secure the perimeter. No one leaves the plaza until this situation is resolved. The federal troops moved with practiced efficiency, establishing positions around the square, while keeping their weapons at the ready, but not directly threatening Reed's militia. It created a standoff, Reed and his loyalists in the center near the gallows, the federal forces controlling the exits, and Wade Bell and the confused guards caught in between. Wade seized the moment to move closer to Bell, who had backed against a wall, still holding the pistol he'd taken. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Bell managed a pained smile. Been better. Where's Swift River? Creating a diversion at the jail. She should be joining us shortly. Wade glanced toward Reed, who was engaged in a heated argument with Marshal Jeffords. Pucker came through. The federal warrants are real. Reed won't surrender easily, Bell warned. He knows what awaits him if he's arrested. As if to confirm Bell's assessment, Reed suddenly broke away from his confrontation with Jeffords, shouting to his men, "This is a conspiracy to undermine territorial authority. Defend yourselves." Several militiamen raised their rifles, but before they could fire, a new voice rang out across the plaza. Swift River emerging from a side street, her hands raised to show she was unarmed. "People of Santa Fe," she called, her voice carrying clearly in the tense silence that had fallen. "Judge Reed has been selling Apache women and children as slaves to mining companies in Mexico. I have seen his records with my own eyes." All attention shifted to her as she walked steadily toward the center of the plaza. "He ordered the massacre of my mother's village 15 years ago to silence those who opposed his corrupt dealings. He has used fear of my people to hide his crimes against both Apache and settler alike." Reed's face drained of color, then flushed with rage. "Shoot her," he ordered, raising his own pistol. "She's trying to incite rebellion." Whether any of his men would have obeyed became moot as Marshal Jeffords spurred his horse forward, placing himself between Swift River and Reed's forces. "The next man who raises a weapon will be shot," he stated flatly. "This woman is under federal protection as a witness to crimes against the United States." Reed, seeing his control slipping away, made a desperate decision. He lunged towards Swift River, his pistol aimed directly at her heart. "You should have died in the desert," he snarled. Wade reacted instantly, throwing himself forward. His shot caught Reed in the shoulder, spinning the judge half around, but not stopping his advance. Reed returned fire, the bullet grazing Wade's arm in a line of fire. Before either could shoot again, Swift River moved with the lightning quickness that had served her in the clearing against the Blackburns. She ducked under Reed's extended arm, redirected his pistol upward, and drove her knee into his midsection. Reed doubled over, gasping for breath, but managed to grab Swift River's hair, with his free hand yanking her off balance. They struggled briefly before federal troops reached them, forcibly separating the combatants and disarming Reed. "Harlan Reed," Marshal Jeffords announced, formally dismounting to stand before the gasping judge. "You are under arrest for corruption, obstruction of justice, murder, and human trafficking. You will be transported to Washington to face federal charges." Reed's eyes darted around the plaza, seeking any avenue of escape or support. Finding none, he fixed his gaze on Swift River with a hatred so intense it seemed to distort his features. "You think this is justice," he spat. "I brought civilization to this wilderness. Everything I've done was necessary to tame this territory and its savage inhabitants." Swift River met his gaze steadily. "My people lived in harmony with this land for centuries before your civilization arrived. The only savagery here is what you brought with you. Reed lunged against his captor's grip, still struggling despite his wound. Your mother thought the same, he hissed. Willow Song with her high ideals about peace between our peoples. She never understood that coexistence is impossible. One must dominate or be dominated. Wade stepped forward, his expression hardened by cold clarity. You ordered the raid on our village. You had my wife killed because she opposed your monopoly on trade. A necessary sacrifice, Reed sneered. She was turning the Apache against proper commerce, encouraging them to deal directly with settlers, bypassing the systems I had established. His gaze shifted to Swift River. I didn't know you had survived until years later when reports reached me of a half-breed child taken in by the Bennetts. By then it was simpler to monitor you than eliminate you. The casual admission of such calculated cruelty stunned even the hardened federal marshals holding Reed. Judge Parker, who had arrived with additional authorities, stepped forward. Add conspiracy to commit murder to the charges, he instructed Marshal Jeffords, and ensure that every word of this confession is documented for the federal court. Reed seemed beyond caring what additional crimes were added to his indictment. His empire was crumbling around him, his carefully constructed facade of respectability shattered beyond repair. As the marshals led him away, he called back over his shoulder. This territory will descend into chaos without me. The Apache will rise up and you'll wish I was still in power when they're burning your homes and killing your children. That's enough, Jeffords said firmly, nodding to his men to remove Reed from the plaza. To Wade and Swift River, he added, Judge Parker has explained your situation. You are both under federal protection now. Reed's militia has been disbanded and his emergency declarations nullified. The tension that had gripped the plaza began to dissipate as citizens realized the confrontation had ended without the bloodshed many had feared. Bell, still nursing his injuries but standing straighter now that his manacles had been removed, approached Wade and Swift River. Not exactly how I planned it, he admitted with a rueful smile, but effective nonetheless. Reed's confession in front of witnesses will make the prosecutor's job considerably easier. What happens now? Swift River asked, looking around at the federal troops securing the plaza and removing the hastily constructed gallows. Now, Judge Parker replied, joining their conversation, we begin the process of untangling Reed's web of corruption. It will take time, his influence extended throughout the territorial government and beyond. But with your testimonies and the evidence we've gathered, justice will be served. Bell nodded agreement. The territorial governor will likely be replaced. Several officials implicated in Reed's schemes have already fled. There's an opportunity here to establish a more just administration, one that respects both settler and Apache rights. Wade, who had been watching Swift River closely during this exchange, noticed her attention had shifted to the northern horizon, where the mountains met the deepening blue of the evening sky. Following her gaze, he saw what had captured her interest, a small group of riders approaching the city, their silhouettes distinctive against the sunset. Apache riders. They've come to learn the truth, Swift River said softly. Word of Reed's accusations would have reached the reservation. They need to know whether war is truly coming. Judge Parker noticed the approaching riders as well. We should send a delegation to meet them, he decided. Assure them that Reed's claims were fabricated and that the federal government seeks peaceful relations. I'll go, Swift River offered immediately. They will recognize me as one of their own, despite my years among the white settlers. Wade stepped forward. I'll accompany her, he said, his tone making it clear this was not a request, but a statement of intent. Parker considered briefly, then nodded. Marshal Jeffords will provide an escort. This is an opportunity to begin healing the divisions Reed deliberately fostered. As they prepared to leave the plaza, Bell caught Wade's arm. There's something else you should know, he said, his expression somber. We found Nathan Cooper. Wade's heart constricted. Alive. Yes, but badly wounded. Reed's men left him for dead, but he managed to drag himself to a line shack where a shepherd found him. He's at the territorial hospital now. Bell's face softened slightly. He's been asking for you both. Relief flooded through Wade. Cooper's survival was unexpected good fortune in a day already marked by pivotal turns. We'll see him as soon as we've met with the Apache delegation, he promised. The meeting with the Apache riders took place at the northern gate as twilight deepened the shadows across the landscape. 5 warriors sat their horses with dignified stillness as Swift River approached Wade and Marshal Jeffords, a respectful distance behind her. She spoke to them in their language, her hands occasionally moving in expressive gestures that transcended the verbal communication. Wade watched, struck by how naturally she navigated between worlds, the Apache heritage she had rediscovered and the white culture in which she had been raised. After several minutes, Swift River motioned for Wade to join them. "This is Tall Cloud," she introduced, indicating the eldest rider, a man with deeply lined features and penetrating eyes. "He is a council elder from the reservation. He knew my mother." Wade acknowledged the introduction with a respectful nod. "I am honored to meet you." Tall Cloud studied Wade with the careful assessment of someone accustomed to judging character. "Swift River tells me you are the husband of Willow Song," he said in accented but clear English, "that you have helped expose the true enemy of our people." "Reed has hurt both our peoples," Wade replied honestly. "His lies and greed caused suffering that never needed to happen." The elder considered this, then inclined his head slightly. "There is wisdom in your words. Too often we have blamed all white men for the actions of the few who seek only power and wealth." He turned to Swift River. "Your mother worked for peace between our worlds. It seems her daughter walks the same path." Swift River accepted this observation with quiet dignity. "I have lived in both worlds, Elder. I see value in each and possibility in their harmony." Tall Cloud nodded, then addressed Marshal Jeffords. "We will return to our people with news that Reed's threats were false, but we will watch carefully to see if his replacement brings true change or merely new words hiding old intentions." "That's fair," Jeffords acknowledged. "For my part, I can promise that the federal government is committed to honoring its treaties and addressing legitimate grievances." With the immediate threat of conflict diffused, the Apache delegation prepared to depart. Before leaving, Tall Cloud spoke again to Swift River in their shared language, too softly for Wade to hear. Whatever was said brought a look of profound emotion to her face, and she bowed her head briefly in what appeared to be acceptance of something significant. As the riders disappeared into the gathering darkness, Swift River turned to Wade, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Tall Cloud knew my mother well," she explained. "He says I have her spirit and her courage, but my father's eyes and determination." She took a deep breath. "He remembers you from when you lived among them. Says you were a good man who respected their ways." Wade felt a complex mix of emotions, gratification at the elder's recollection, sorrow for the years, lost hope for what might yet be recovered. "What else did he say to you at the end?" he asked gently. "He invited me to return to the reservation, to learn the old ways more fully, to become a bridge between our peoples." She studied Wade's reaction carefully. "It would mean leaving Santa Fe at least for a time." Wade nodded, understanding the opportunity this represented for her. "You should go if that's what you want. There's much of your mother's heritage that was stolen from you." He hesitated, then added, "When you're ready, I'll be waiting. Whatever relationship we build from here, father and daughter, or simply friends who have faced danger together, it's your choice to make." Swift River's expression softened with appreciation for his understanding. "First we see Cooper," she said, redirecting their focus to the immediate need. "Then we decide what comes next." The Territorial Hospital occupied a former mission building on the eastern edge of Santa Fe. Inside, the whitewashed corridors were lit by oil lamps that cast a warm glow against the adobe walls. A young doctor led Wade and Swift River to a small private room where Nathan Cooper lay, his robust frame diminished somewhat by bandages and the pallor of blood loss, but his eyes alert and clear. "Took you long enough," Cooper greeted them with a weak attempt at his usual gruffness. "Been lying here wondering if Reed had managed to finish what his men started." Wade moved to his old friend's bedside, clasping Cooper's hand firmly. "You're harder to kill than they expected," he replied, relief evident in his voice. "Bell told us you were found in a line shack." Cooper nodded, wincing slightly at the movement. "Crawled there after they left. Bullet took a piece of my lung, another grazed my head. Figured I was done for, but seems I'm too ornery to die so easily." His gaze shifted to Swift River. "And you, young lady, still causing trouble for corrupt officials." She smiled, genuine affection in her expression. "Reed's been arrested. Federal warrants with more charges added after he confessed in the plaza." "Confessed?" Cooper raised an eyebrow, looking to Wade for confirmation. "Lost his composure completely," Wade affirmed, Admitted ordering the raid on our village 15 years ago, killing Willow Song and monitoring Swift River's whereabouts since she was placed with the Bennetts. Cooper absorbed this satisfaction evident in his weathered features. So it's true then, she is your Lily. All evidence points that way, Wade acknowledged. The necklace, the birthmarks of the scar, and now Reed's own admission that she survived the raid. Swift River approached the bed, taking Cooper's other hand. Your investigation helped uncover the truth, not just about Reed's crimes against the Apache, but about my own past. Cooper squeezed her hand weakly. Justice comes in its own time, but it does come. I've believed that my whole life. He looked between them, sensing the unspoken complications. So what happens next for you two? Wade explained Tall Cloud's invitation for Swift River to return to the reservation, while Swift River shared their agreement that the decision about their future relationship remained open to be determined by time and further discovery. Cooper listened thoughtfully, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. Seems right, he said finally. You both need time to come to terms with what's been revealed. Too much has happened too quickly to make lasting decisions now. A nurse appeared in the doorway, gesturing that the visit should conclude to allow the patient rest. Wade promised to return the following day, and they took their leave of Cooper, both heartened by his recovery and the wisdom of his counsel. Outside the hospital, they found Marshal Jeffords waiting with his carriage. Judge Parker has arranged accommodations for you at the governor's mansion, he informed them. It's the most secure location in the city, and given Reed's connections, security remains a priority until we've rounded up all his associates. The governor's mansion proved to be a spacious adobe structure surrounding a central courtyard, its interior furnished with a mixture of Spanish colonial and American frontier styles. Separate rooms had been prepared for Wade and Swift River, with federal guards stationed discreetly throughout the property. After the tension and danger of recent days, the luxury of privacy, soft beds, and hot water for bathing seemed almost surreal. Wade spent nearly an hour soaking in a copper tub, allowing the warm water to ease the aches of his various injuries. Afterward, dressed in clean clothes provided by the household staff, he found himself restless despite his physical exhaustion. He wandered into the mansion's library, a well-appointed room lined with leather-bound volumes and illuminated by the soft glow of kerosene lamps. To his surprise, Swift River was already there, similarly bathed and changed, seated in a window alcove with a book open on her lap. I couldn't sleep, she explained as he entered. Too many thoughts circling. Wade nodded, understanding. Same here. The danger is past, but the mind takes time to accept that fact. He settled into a chair across from her, noting that she had chosen a volume of poetry Emily Dickinson, if he recognized the binding correctly. Another glimpse of the education she had received from the Bennetts, so different from the traditional upbringing she would have had in her mother's village. I've been thinking about what happens after Reed's trial, Swift River said, closing the book. About who I am now, knowing what we've learned. And, Wade prompted gently when she paused, I'm not simply Lily Wade, the daughter you lost, she said carefully. Nor am I only Swift River, the Apache woman raised by missionaries. I'm something between worlds, belonging to both yet fully to neither. Wade considered her words, recognizing the profound identity crisis she was navigating. When I was a surgeon during the war, he said after a moment, I treated men who had lost limbs. They would speak of phantom sensations, feeling pain or movement in an arm or leg that was no longer there. Swift River nodded, encouraging him to continue. For 15 years, I've lived with a phantom family, the presence of absence, if that makes sense. Willow Song and Lily gone, but never truly gone from my thoughts, my dreams, my sense of self. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Finding you doesn't erase those 15 years for either of us. You built a life, an identity, a purpose, separate from any connection to me. That's valuable and real. Yet the connection exists, she observed quietly. Blood and memory and shared loss. Yes, Wade agreed. And it's up to us to decide what we build on that foundation. Not what we recover, that's impossible, but what we create anew. Swift River seemed to find comfort in this perspective. I want to learn about my mother's people, she said with growing certainty, to understand the heritage that was taken from me. But I also want to know you, the father I've found after so many years of believing myself alone in the world. Then that's where we start, Wade replied simply. No expectations, no obligations. Just two people discovering who they are to each other. No, not who they might have been in a different life. A companionable silence fell between them, the weight of decisions deferred in favor of allowing their relationship to develop naturally. Outside the window, the stars shone with the particular brilliance unique to the desert sky, a canopy of light stretching from horizon to horizon. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of official statements, depositions, and preparations for Reed's transfer to Washington for trial. Wade and Swift River became central figures in the federal investigation, their testimonies forming the cornerstone of the case against not only Reed but several territorial officials who had enabled or profited from his corrupt schemes. Cooper recovered enough to provide his own deposition, his decades of meticulous record-keeping proving invaluable to the prosecutors. Bell, released from custody and cleared of all charges, resumed his journalistic work, publishing a detailed expose of Reed's operations that sent shockwaves through territorial politics. Throughout this period, Wade and Swift River began the delicate process of building a relationship that acknowledged their biological connection while respecting the separate lives they had lived. They shared stories, Wade telling Swift River about her mother, about the village where they had lived, about the young child Lily had been. Swift River describing her life with the Bennetts, her education, her gradual awakening to her Apache heritage, and her determination to seek justice for her people. DNA testing, still a relatively new science but available through federal resources, confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. Swift River was indeed Lily Wade, daughter of Jackson and Willowsong Wade, survivor of a massacre orchestrated by Harlan Reed. The scientific confirmation brought a sense of closure, but it was their growing personal connection that held the greater significance for both of them. In Swift River, Wade found echoes of both Willowsong's spiritual strength and his own stubborn determination. In Wade, Swift River discovered a link to her past that filled gaps in her understanding of herself. 3 weeks after the confrontation in the plaza, as Reed's case proceeded through the federal justice system, Swift River made her decision. She found Wade on the mansion's roof terrace where he had taken to watching the sunset each evening. "I'm going to accept Tall Cloud's invitation," she told him, joining him at the adobe parapet. "I need to spend time on the reservation to learn the traditions and wisdom that should have been my birthright." Wade nodded, having anticipated this choice. "When will you leave?" "In 2 days. A delegation is returning after meetings with the new territorial governor." She turned to face him directly. "I'd like you to come with me, at least for the initial journey, to be properly introduced to my mother's people, not as a stranger, but as family." The invitation touched Wade deeply. "I'd be honored," he said sincerely. "And after that," Swift River smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "After that, we continue finding our way. I'll spend time on the reservation learning what I need to learn. You'll establish your clinic in the border region, as we discussed, providing medical care to both settlers and Apache." She paused, her expression softening. "And we'll visit each other, share meals, stories, time, build something new from what was nearly lost forever." It wasn't the reunion fantasy that Wade might once have imagined, father and daughter simply resuming a relationship as if 15 years of separation had never occurred. It was something more complex, more mature, and ultimately more meaningful, two adults acknowledging their connection while respecting each other's autonomy and distinct paths. "I'd like that," Wade agreed, feeling a sense of rightness settle over the arrangement. "Very much." They stood together as the sun completed its descent, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. Below them, Santa Fe continued its evening routines, a city beginning to emerge from the shadow of corruption that had darkened it for so long. 2 days later, a small procession departed the northern gate of Santa Fe. At its center rode Swift River and Wade, flanked by the Apache delegation, led by Tall Cloud. They carried with them official documents from the new territorial administration recognizing long-standing Apache grievances and establishing a framework for more equitable relations going forward. As they crested a rise that offered a last view of Santa Fe behind them and the vast landscape ahead, Swift River reined in her horse beside Wade's. "When I was very small," she said, "before the raid, my mother told me a story of a river that flows beneath the desert, invisible on the surface, but life-giving to all who know how to find it." Wade nodded, remembering Willowsong's talent for weaving natural observations into spiritual teachings. "She called it the hidden water path," he recalled. "Said it connected all living things even when they seemed separated by impossible distances." Swift River smiled, pleased by this shared memory. "Perhaps that's what happened with us. Despite Reed's efforts to sever our connection, something deeper than blood or memory kept the possibility of reunion alive. She touched the jade leaf pendant that still hung at her throat, like a river flowing beneath the desert of our separation. It was a poetic notion combining Apache spirituality with the undeniable reality of their rediscovery of each other. Wade found comfort in it not as literal truth, perhaps, but as a meaningful way to understand the improbable journey that had brought them to this moment. "Your mother would be proud of who you've become," he said softly. "As am I." Swift River acknowledged this with a slight inclination of her head, the simple gesture conveying profound emotion. Then at a signal from Tall Cloud, they urged their horses forward, continuing their journey into the heart of the territory that had shaped them both, a land of harsh extremes and unexpected beauty, of profound loss and remarkable resilience. Behind them, the sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky, its heat building as it had on the day Wade first saw Swift River staked to the desert floor. But now, instead of an instrument of punishment and death, the sun illuminated a path forward for Swift River and Wade, for the Apache people, and for a territory beginning the long process of healing from wounds both old and new. 3 months later, Wade stood on the porch of a newly constructed clinic at the edge of Apache territory. The simple wooden building represented the fulfillment of a promise he had made to himself during those first days after rescuing Swift River to use his medical skills in service of those who had least access to proper care, regardless of race or background. Cooper had joined him in the enterprise, his investigative skills redirected toward ensuring that the reforms promised in the wake of Reed's arrest were actually implemented. Together, they had established a reputation for fair dealing and practical assistance that transcended the lingering tensions between settler and Apache communities. A dust cloud on the horizon caught Wade's attention, a lone rider approaching from the direction of the reservation. He recognized Swift River's distinctive posture, even at a distance, her seat on horseback, reflecting the Apache horsemanship she had been diligently studying. She dismounted with fluid grace, leading her horse to the water trough before joining Wade on the porch. 3 months of immersion in her mother's culture had subtly altered her appearance, and bearing her clothing now incorporated traditional elements, and her hair was arranged in the style of Apache women. But her smile of greeting was unchanged, warm and genuine as she embraced Wade. "You look well," he observed, noting the healthy color in her cheeks and the calm confidence in her eyes. "I am well," she confirmed, settling onto the porch bench beside him. "The time with my mother's people has been healing. I'm learning things I should have known from childhood, stories, skills, ways of understanding the world." She glanced at him. "And you, the clinic seems busy." Wade nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. "More patients than Cooper and I can easily handle. We're training 2 apprentices, a young settler woman and an Apache man, to assist with basic care." They shared news of their respective experiences over the past weeks, Wade describing challenging cases he had treated and progress in implementing the new territorial healthcare initiatives, Swift River relating her deepening connection to Apache traditions and the gradual acceptance she had earned within the tribe. As twilight approached, painting the distant mountains in soft purple hues, Swift River produced a small package wrapped in deerskin from her saddlebag. "The elders asked me to bring this to you," she said, offering it with both hands in the traditional Apache manner of presenting a gift. Wade accepted it with appropriate respect, carefully unwrapping the soft hide to reveal a bracelet of intricately woven horsehair and silver beads. "It's beautiful," he said, recognizing the significant craftsmanship involved. "It marks you as a friend of the people," Swift River explained, "more specifically as family to one of their own." She helped him secure it around his wrist, the dark horsehair striking against his sun-browned skin. "They acknowledge our connection and with it a bond between communities." The simple gesture represented a profound shift from the suspicion and hostility that had defined Apache settler relations for generations. Wade understood its significance went far beyond the personal. It was a small but meaningful step toward the coexistence that Willow Song had envisioned so many years before. "I'm honored," he said sincerely. Swift River nodded, then turned her gaze toward the setting sun. "I've been thinking about names," she said after a moment of comfortable silence. "About who I am and how I'm called." Wade listened attentively, recognizing this as an important moment in her ongoing journey of self-definition. "To the Apache, I am Swift River, a name that connects me to my mother's people and honors their traditions," she continued, To the Bennetts, I was Ruth the orphan they raised with Christian charity and genuine affection. She looked directly at Wade. And to you, I might have been Lily had our lives not been violently separated. Wade nodded, understanding the complexity of identity she was navigating. Each name represents a different facet of who you are, he observed. Different chapters in your story. Yes, she agreed, and I've decided to honor all of them. To the Apache, I remain Swift River. In legal documents and territorial business, I'll use Ruth Wade, acknowledging both my upbringing and my true parentage. She paused, a flicker of emotion crossing her features. And between us, in the private space of family, perhaps I could be Lily again, not the child who was lost, but the daughter who found her way home by a different path than expected. The suggestion moved Wade deeply. It represented neither a rejection of her complex history nor a simplistic return to what might have been, but rather an integration of all the elements that had shaped her into the remarkable woman she had become. I'd like that very much, he said, his voice thick with feeling. They sat together as darkness gathered around the clinic, sharing the comfortable silence of people who had found their way to mutual understanding across seemingly insurmountable barriers of time and circumstance. In the distance, coyotes began their evening chorus, their haunting calls echoing across the desert landscape. Swift River Ruth to the wider world. Lily, in the sacred space of family, gazed up at the emerging stars, her expression peaceful. Mother used to say that the stars are the campfires of those who have gone before us, she remarked. That they watch over us, guiding our paths even in the darkest nights. Wade followed her gaze upward, finding comfort in the image. I like to think she's up there, he said softly. Seeing what you've become, what we've found despite everything meant to keep us apart. Not despite, Swift River corrected gently, because of. Every hardship, every separation, every challenge shaped the path that eventually brought us here. She turned to him, her features softened by starlight. Under this desert sun, we've both been burned nearly broken, but also forged into something stronger than we were before. Wade considered this wisdom, recognizing in it the blending of Apache spirituality with the resilience he had always valued. His daughter had indeed found her way to an identity that honored all aspects of her heritage, a bridge between worlds that had too long been separated by fear and misunderstanding. To new beginnings, he said, offering his hand. She took it, her grip firm and warm, and to old connections rediscovered. Together they watched as the moon rose over the eastern horizon, casting silver light across the landscape they both now called home, a territory marked by both painful history and hopeful possibility, where the harsh sun that had nearly taken Swift River's life now illuminated a future neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed beneath its unforgiving gaze. In that moment of quiet companionship, Wade felt a sense of completion that had eluded him for 15 years. Not an ending, their journey of reconnection had only just begun, but the closing of a circle that had remained painfully open since the day he returned to find his family seemingly lost forever. Under the desert sun, life continued, different than planned, shaped by forces beyond their control, but ultimately resilient and renewed like the desert itself after rain, blossoming with unexpected beauty in the most challenging of environments.